Chapter 181, Ashlock Trading Company. While pulling out the middle of the three offered chairs, Knox scanned the large but mostly barren room. Much like the hallways that led to this part of the White Stone Palace, the room lacked any usual displays of wealth. As a merchant, Knox had spent many hours sitting in gaudy rooms with artwork, swords, and even relics proudly on display to try and show off the owner's vast wealth and prestige. Knox had no respect for any of that, so in a way, she could appreciate the lackluster room that didn't try to put on any pretenses. However, a total lack of wealth on display did beg the question, were the red clothes really this poor? This might be a trap. Knox cursed as her eyes flickered to the red maple leaf earrings dangling from Rosalind's ears from black chains. They were the true prize here, and all Knox really cared about. Even if this was a trap, so long as she could escape with those, it would have been worth it. The chairs on either side of Knox were pulled aside, filling the barren room with the screech of wood scraping stone as her two fellow merchants took their seat. She exchanged a brief nod with Hammond, whose massive frame made the normal-sized seat look like one for a child, and she mostly ignored Lucius as he wasn't in on her little plan. Sadly, Hammond had to be, as she needed his spatial affinity for it to work. "Why are you so late?" Rosalind asked, breaking the short silence that had blanketed the room. "This meeting was scheduled for midday, yet it's near sundown. Not very professional for our first meeting, is it?" "None of your business," Lucius started, but Knox stamped his foot under the table to silence him. "Apologies, we were deep in a rift until a few hours ago, and due to some unforeseen circumstances," Knox crushed Lucius's foot harder. "We stayed inside longer than planned and then used a costly spatial array to get over here as quickly as possible. I hope you will overlook our tardiness." "Fine, I will overlook it this time." Rosalind sighed and stopped looking so aggravated. "Well, with that matter out of the way, I believe it's time for introductions. We already know you three are merchants hailing from the Tainted Cloud sect west of here. Anything else we should know?" Knox exchanged a glance with Hammond and Lucius. As expected, neither seemed interested in entertaining the woman's curiosity. "Nothing springs to mind other than our names. As you know, my name is Knox, and my two acquaintances are Hammond and Lucius." Knox replied, "However, we prefer to keep our capabilities and exploits to ourselves. You never know when one might find a dagger in their back out here." "Fair enough," Rosalind said as she stood up from her chair. "Then allow me to introduce myself. I am known as Rosalind, and I represent the Ashlock Trading Company, as does Diana to my right here." "The Ashlock Trading Company?" Knox raised a brow. "Never heard of them. Do they conduct business elsewhere? And why are you using a fake name?" Knox wondered. "You have your secrets, and I'll keep mine," Rosalind laughed. "But I guess you could say that. We have a strong partnership with the Redcliffe family, hence Elder Margaret's presence in this meeting, and there is one other sponsor I should introduce." Knox briefly glanced at the stern Redcliffe woman before noticing a portal suddenly manifesting within the room that even seemed to take Hammond by surprise. A man wearing a long, flowing white robe stepped through the distorted rift. Much like his hair, a stream of silver slowly flowed around his arms. Someone from the Silver Spire family. Knox's eyes widened. How had she never heard about this Ashlock Trading Company if they have ties to such an influential family? "This is Sebastian Silverspire. He represents one of our main sponsors." Rosalind gestured to the man who silently took his place beside Elder Margaret. Rosalind then sat down. "Now, with introductions out of the way, let's get down to business." Rosalind waved her hand over the table. Her silver spatial ring flashed, and 4 porcelain pill bottles appeared. "Each bottle contains 11 of our mid-range pills." Rosalind picked up one of the bottles and placed it closer to Knox. "This one contains pills that are guaranteed to help with enlightenment of the Tao." Lucius snorted. "Yeah, right." Rosalind tilted her head and scrutinized Lucius. "If the fact these pills are backed by 2 noble families of the Blood Lotus sect isn't enough to convince you, then feel free to try one for yourself to prove my claim. Free of charge, of course." Knox decided to take Rosalind up on that offer by leaning over and carefully picking up the pill bottle, popped the cork, and was surprised by the fruity smell. "How much would one of these pill bottles go for?" "All of our mid-range pills go for 1 high-grade spirit stone or 30 dragon crowns," Rosalind replied. "Somewhat cheap for spirit tier pills," Hammond noted as he leaned in closer to give the pills a smell. "They smell rather pure as well." Rosalind placed the other pill bottles before Hammond and Lucius. "While Knox tries that pill, why don't you two try the neural root and deep meditation pills? What about those ones?" Lucius gestured with his chin to the remaining porcelain bottles on Rosalind's side of the table. This last bottle allows a cultivator to pick flowers without harming the plant. Very useful for alchemists and should sell well, but harder to show you its value here. Interesting, Knox admitted. Even though she hadn't come here with much expectations for these pills, things had gotten far more interesting. Not only did the pills have unheard of effects, but this whole thing became a lot more serious with the involvement of the Silver Spires. In her mind, Rosalind had gone from a cocky alchemist to a mysterious figure that represented this elusive Ashlock trading company. Tilting the bottle to the side, Knox retrieved one of the enlightenment pills that rolled out the hole and popped it into her mouth. Hammond and Lucius followed her lead with the other pills, and the room went silent. Closing her eyes and focusing within, Knox made sure to suppress the pill with her chi and observe it closely. If it turned out to be poisonous, she could stop it before it spread. As the pill's outer layer slowly dissolved in her soul fire, Knox noted the lack of poisonous ingredients, so she allowed the pill to spread its effect throughout her body with some caution. Alright, let's see. This pill apparently helps with enlightenment, so I should begin meditation. Knox drifted into a half state of meditation while keeping some sense of her real-world surroundings. After spending years roaming the wilderness and away from any type of civilization, she had developed this crucial skill. There wasn't always someone to watch her back while she recovered her chi in the wilderness surrounded by monsters. Opening her consciousness to the heavens, streams of chi carrying their profound whispers flooded the dark space. Knox had never been one to chase enlightenment or try to learn the Tao of another affinity, as it wasn't guaranteed power and, in her case, a waste of time. Some had a natural ability to focus and understand heaven's whispers, while others could spend years attempting to comprehend them to no avail. Let's focus on darkness to test if this pill helps, as I have some understanding of the darkness Tao. Knox shifted through the myriad of chi streams and mentally latched onto one of pure darkness that spiraled alongside a stream of light. As usual, even the darkness chi she was so close to refuse to divulge its secrets, but something changed. A wave of power passed through her consciousness like a tide and calmed the chorus of whispers that sounded like 1,000 people talking at once, making them incoherent into something more understandable. No way, it actually works. Knox found it easier to drown out the other chi stream's whispers and focus on the Tao of darkness. It began to tell her things, a little too fast for her to remember everything, but she felt her understanding of the darkness Tao increasing. And then, as quickly as the tide came, it left, causing Knox's consciousness to once more be flooded with 1,000 whispers. Her eyes snapped open, and she reached for the pill bottle to try and get another one. Next one won't be free. Rosalind's harsh tone made Knox pause and glare at the blonde girl across the table. She had some money to spend, but would it really be worth it? The effect was incredible, but with its short duration of a minute at most, I would need to go through an entire bottle to get any meaningful enlightenment. It's not worth wasting a high-grade spirit stone for. Incredible. Hammond's shout drew Knox's attention. The giant man was standing up, doing a weird dance, and flexing his fingers. What the fuck are you doing? Knox snapped, deciding to take her annoyance out on her fellow merchant. This neural root pill is fantastic. I can control every inch of my body with perfect accuracy. Hammond laughed as he glanced down at his trousers, even that part. Knox gripped his shoulders and forced Hammond to take a seat. There was an awkward pause as everyone processed what Hammond had been implying, but thankfully, Rosalind seemed clueless as she spoke up. The neural root pill is perfect for directing the flow of chi around your body and can also be used while fighting to increase your reaction speed and accuracy. Meanwhile, the enlightenment pill works very well in combination with the deep meditation pill as it extends the short duration. Knox glanced at Lucius as he would have been the one to try this deep meditation pill, and to her surprise, she saw the man with a peaceful look on his face to the point she wondered if he was asleep. This was bizarre as Lucius was even better at keeping one eye open while meditating than her, so his guard shouldn't be down like this. Switching her focus back to Rosalind while keeping her guard up on behalf of Lucius, Knox asked, "And how many bottles of these pills do you have?" "We are willing to sell 30 bottles of each mid-range pill to you today," Rosalind replied, "for a total of 120 high-grade spirit stones." Knox took a moment to ponder. Although these pills have interesting effects and are being sold for a reasonable price, I have no interest in coming back here to pick up another batch of pills to sell. That's not how I like to conduct business. One rare artifact from a rift will net me more than I can sell this entire batch of pills for, and constantly returning to a place makes me far too predictable. Knox drummed her fingers on the desk, and the sound of her silver spatial rings clinking filled the room. She had enemies. There were other merchants out there willing to hunt her down and steal her inventory rather than try and venture into rifts to get it themselves. Which is why she preferred to always stay on the move, hunting for the next rift to delve or monster to harvest. It's not like I came here for any darn pills in the first place. Knox mused as her eyes briefly landed on the red maple earrings. Ever since she had first met Stella, who was now mysteriously going by the alias of Rosalind, she had taken an interest in those earrings. They were easily a top-tier artifact. After experiencing their power, she wanted them for herself. We can negotiate a deal later. Knox smiled as she paused her fingers. Do you have anything else to show us? Sure. So far, I have shown our mass-produced pills, but we have some more expensive pills that might interest any wealthy clients you know of back in the Tainted Cloud sect. Rosalind waved her hand, and many ornate wooden boxes appeared. Snapping 4 of them open, Rosalind revealed a single pill within the confines of the well-made boxes. Only one pill? Hammond asked as he loomed over the table. How much would you charge for this one? 100 high-grade spirit stones per one, Rosalind replied thoughtfully, and I will once again allow you to try each of them for free. Hammond licked his lips. How generous. 100 for a single pill. Lucius narrowed his eyes. That's the going rate for a profound or even an earth-grade pill. What could these possibly do to justify such a high price? Rosalind pushed one of the ornate boxes over to Lucius with a flick of spatial chi. This one permanently improves the quality of your spiritual root. That's fucking nonsense. Hammond slammed the table, making all the boxes jump a little into the air, and hair-thin cracks spread across the wooden table's surface. Then our business is done, Diana spoke up for the first time, reaching over to take back the box. Not so fast. Lucius snatched the box and retrieved the pill. If what you say is true, then this is certainly worth the hefty price tag and careful consideration. Knox watched as Lucius consumed the expensive pill and closed his eyes. Idiot, Hammond sneered, improving one's spirit root is near impossible. Knox ignored Hammond and watched intently. If the pill really worked, that further enforced her plans to run and never look back. If knowledge of her carrying pills that could permanently improve a cultivator's spirit root got out, she wouldn't even be able to escape to another continent. Merchants would hunt her across the realm to get their hands on it and learn of the source, and then they would slit her throat to leave no trace behind. Lucius suddenly shot up from his seat, sending the chair hurtling backward. His polished armor began to glow white and illuminated the entire room. Everyone was on edge as Lucius raised his hand and stared effortlessly into the blinding white light. It really worked, he muttered as he rotated his hand and glared into the light with a dumbfounded expression. He then lowered his glowing hand and began to eye up the 2 boxes before Knox and Hammond containing the spirit root improvement pill with greed. Knox shoved him aside and quickly ate her own pill before he got to it. She didn't need to close her eyes or meditate to feel the overwhelming feeling that immediately spread throughout her body. In shock, she summoned a flame of pure darkness to her hand and marveled at how fast the purity had improved. What's next? Lucius demanded as he stopped glowing like a walking sun. Well, we have one that purges your heart demons, and this ointment enhances a person's beauty, Rosalind said while pointing to the boxes and a jar containing a pinkish cream on her side of the table. However, I think the next pill you guys should try is this one. Rosalind used telekinesis to push 3 boxes across the table. Knox and Lucius extracted the pill from the box and gulped down the provided pill without a second thought, but Hammond seemed to hesitate. What does this pill do? Hammond inquired as Knox bathed the pill in soul flames within her stomach. It's one of our strongest poisons, Rosalind said casually as she summoned 3 porcelain pill bottles, and here are the antidotes. It was a fucking trap all along. Knox cursed as she viciously fought the potent poison festering in her stomach with her soul flames. A portal snapped into reality before Rosalind's face, and Hammond's massive hands reached through and effortlessly tore the red maple earrings from Rosalind's ears, causing her to scream out in pain. Everything happened in slow motion as Knox surged chi into her senses. She hadn't even needed to exchange a single nod or word with her fellow merchants for them to act accordingly. Even Lucius, who was unaware of the plan to seize the earrings, was quick on the uptake as he flashed the room with his light chi the moment the portal before Rosalind's face snapped closed. While everyone was blinded, Hammond quickly began tearing a rift through space for them to escape through while Knox absorbed all the pill bottles and boxes left on the table into her spatial rings, including the supposed antidote, which she didn't trust at all. Other than being poisoned, everything was going perfectly. With this, she got the artifact she was after and a load of surprisingly powerful pills for free. There was just the slight issue of betraying this mysterious Ashlock trading company, which seemed to have ties to the Silver Spire family, but what was one more target on her back? It's not like she planned to stick around here for much longer. Rift is ready. Hammond yelled. His hands were wide apart, and between them was a crackling doorway through space that seemed to lead to somewhere out in the wilderness. It was incredibly unstable compared to his usual portals, and the large man seemed to be wrestling to keep it open. It must be that strange presence he mentioned earlier suppressing his spatial techniques. Wasting no time, Knox dashed over and could feel Lucius close behind. She wasn't all that worried about anyone in the room even attempting to stop them, as all three of them were at the peak of the Star Core realm with far more combat experience than two girls, an old Redclaw elder, and a Silver Spire servant. You fucking dare take that which my father gifted me. Rosalind yelled from across the room, and then, to Knox's confusion, the stone wall in front of her exploded. A tall humanoid figure with a black skull for a face and strange deer antlers emerged from the newly created hole in the wall and blurred toward Hammond, who couldn't react in time as he was keeping open the rift. Hammond screamed as the creature that was a ghost to Knox's spiritual senses raised its spindly limbs that ended in claws and cleaved through Hammond and the portal, slicing them in two with a single attack. Despite the sudden and gruesome attack, Knox had kept her eyes on the prize. She dived onto the floor to salvage Hammond's severed hand, still grasping one of the red maple leaf earrings. Where the fuck is the other one? Placing the earring into her spatial ring for safekeeping, Knox was left staring down a void monster that had so easily torn Hammond to shreds without a proper escape plan and desperately searching for the other earring. Well, shit. Chapter 182, Beatdown. Knox bent backward as the void creature's claws blurred past her nose with an eerie silence. If not for her centuries spent honing her reaction time while fighting monsters in rifts, she would have lost her head. She rolled backward to get back on her feet and away from the monster. Her spatial ring flashed, and an artifact she had used many times in the past appeared in her hand, a dimension locker. It was a highly sought-after artifact by most cultivators, especially assassins like herself. This should cut the connection to whoever is controlling this monster. Knox threw the black marble on the floor and watched as a wave of power pulsed out, sealing the area from any outside influence and stopping any escape talismans from being used. This also served as a way to stop whoever got the other earring from leaving. The void creature looked curiously at the black marble near Knox's feet and then seemed to deem it a threat as it tried to kill her and destroy the artifact. How the fuck is it still moving? Is the marble defective, or is it able to act on its own? Lucius, kill this fucking thing, Knox shouted as she kicked the marble far out of the creature's reach and rolled to the side. She then sunk into the shadow cast by the table to avoid another swipe that left deep gashes in the stone. There was no way she wanted to face the creature in combat, as Void Chi was incredibly dangerous because it could ignore life-saving artifacts and cleave straight through a cultivator's flesh with ease. As the familiar, comforting darkness embraced her and she faded into the background away from those claws, she could spend a moment trying to get the very potent poison spreading throughout her body under control and analyze the situation. This wasn't the first time Knox had been poisoned. Usually, she could quickly burn a poison with her soul fire before it got a chance to spread, but Hammond had launched his attack before she had gotten a chance to suppress it fully, and it was far stronger than she had expected. Summoning a few body-cleansing pills of her own, as she didn't trust the ones Rosalind had provided, she ate a handful and then focused back on the situation in the room as her body was flooded with a soothing feeling. Hammond was dead, sliced into 5 pieces by the void creature's claws. His bloody remains dyed half the room in red, where the void creature was now recovering from its missed attack on her and was changing its focus to Lucius, who was charging up an attack. Now, what should I do? I could escape alone and leave Lucius here to face off against that creature and the other people in the room. That way, I can keep the loot to myself. But I can't go until I get a hold of that second earring. There's no way to tell if the artifact can work with only one. So that begs the question, who could have taken it? Her eyes darted between the members of the Ashlock trading company, who were only now making a move. Hammond's sudden attack on Rosalind had clearly dumbfounded Elder Margaret and Diana, but now, after recovering from the blinding attack and seeing a fight occurring, Elder Margaret was surrounding her fists in crimson flames, and Diana had a dense mist blasting out of her and filling the room. Those two were far too stunned by Hammond to reach the second earring before me. So it must have been someone else. Knox's gaze drifted to the silver spire man who had already jumped over the table and was conjuring a spear of silver to impale through the preoccupied Lucius. Radiant blast. Lucius shouted as he raised his glowing hands. A beam of white light exploded from his palms and hit the void creature square in its chest, carving a burning hole straight through the void flesh and melting through the stone wall behind the monster. The creature staggered to the side, but before Lucius could finish it off, he had to turn and face Sebastian. Knox briefly debated lending a helping hand, but Lucius was a tough bastard to kill, so she remained in the shadows with her senses spread far and wide, trying to locate the missing earrings. Prism shield. Lucius said as he raised one hand, and multiple shields of celestial light materialized between Sebastian and himself. Knox had always found Lucius's arrogant habit of shouting out his technique names odd, but he claimed it helped him empower them. The conjured shields of light shattered like glass as Sebastian's liquid spear of silver penetrated them with ease. As the final one shattered and the silver tip was inches from Lucius's face, he ducked down low and planted a glowing fist into Sebastian's side, sending the silver spire man flying backward and crumpling against the far wall. It seemed a victory for Lucius, but Knox noticed that the liquid spear had curved downward at the last second and impaled him through his armor. Lucius cursed as he clutched the gaping wound on his left shoulder. Healing glow, he said as a warm glow pulsed around the wound, and Knox watched it quickly close. A moment passed, and the large meeting room had filled with a swirling dense mist that annoyingly interfered with Knox's spiritual sense. Strange phantoms manifested within the mist, and they began to laugh as they encircled Lucius. What a cheap trick. All illusions perish before my light, Lucius laughed as his armor began to glow brightly, and a wave of light flashed out, eliminating the phantoms and illuminating the dense mist, which revealed a strange shadow dashing through the fog directly at Lucius. Who is that? Knox wondered as the silhouette didn't match anyone she had seen in the room. It was large and inhuman. Perhaps another void monster. Knox didn't have a good line of sight on the shadow as she lurked in the darkness under the table, and the mist interfered with her senses. But Lucius seemed to identify it as a threat as he summoned a blade of light to his hand and raised it to meet the rapidly approaching shadow. The swirling fog parted, and something Knox could only describe as a demoness shot out and lashed at Lucius in a crazed frenzy with claws of shadow. Lucius tried to shrug off the onslaught with his sword, but the demoness used her giant raven wings thrice her size like extra limbs to pummel him from either side. What in the nine realms? That demonic woman isn't even in the Star Core realm but can push Lucius back, who is on the cusp of forming his nascent soul. What kind of species is she? Knox, you bitch, where did you sneak off to? Lucius shouted, help me. Stop being a drama queen, Knox snorted from the shadows, her voice echoing through the room. Lucius chuckled and vanished in a flash of light, leaving the enraged demoness clawing at empty air. He reappeared behind her and pounded her into the ground with an empowered fist. Bucking demon whore, Lucius stamped down on the demoness's back, crushing the bones in her wings and causing her to scream in pain while coughing up black blood. Get off her. A fireball of crimson flames parted the swirling mist and harmlessly dissipated on a quickly conjured light shield. Who? Lucius cursed as he turned to look through the parted mist and laid eyes on a very concerned-looking elder Margaret, standing beside Rosalind, who was busy downing what appeared to be healing pills while clutching her ripped-up and bloody ears. Wait a second, where's Diana? Knox squinted at the demon under Lucius's boot. Is that Diana? Why does she have wings and fangs now? Something was terribly odd about this Ashlock trading company. Not only were they acquainted with one of the most influential families in the wilderness and able to make pills that could permanently improve a person's spirit root, but they also had control over void monsters. And if that wasn't enough, now one of their members was a shape-shifting demon. Lucius stopped stamping on Diana, leaving her half dead, and strode toward Elder Margaret with a smirk. I say we kill them all, Lucius said as he summoned a second sword of light. No survivors mean no problems. With the weird void creature out of action, that was a plan Knox could agree with. Everyone else left from the Ashlock trading company had no way to pose a significant threat. And with them all dead, she could take her time finding the other earring. I also don't want that Silver Spire servant to report me to his family. You kill the Silver Spire servant and Red Claw Elder. Leave Stella to me. Knox's world blurred as she used Shadow Step to instantly emerge from Rosalind's shadow. Knox blinked in confusion as Stella reacted instantly to her emerging from her shadow, Her usually crazed pink eyes that made people uncomfortable to be looked at were now tranquil and focused, as if seeing through her every move. Nobody has ever reacted to my shadow step before losing their head. What the fuck is going on? Knox cursed as she committed to her attack and tried to decapitate Stella with a dagger coated in shadow flames, but almost doubted reality when Stella managed to create a portal around her hand and redirect it to grip Knox's wrist, stopping her attack in its tracks and throwing off her balance. Knox was too baffled to even understand what had happened to react to her wrist being gripped. Even Hammond couldn't create a portal that fast and stop my attack. Is she using some type of thought acceleration or a runic artifact to increase her casting speed? Someone very important gifted me those earrings, Stella declared as she tightened her grip, and then, with all her might, she hurled Knox to the ground with surprising strength. Give it back. Knox rolled to the side, got back onto her feet in a single motion, and faced Stella. The girl's hair was floating high above her head as space distorted and crackled around her. You dare hurt my friends and steal from me? Stella cried as she summoned a sword to her hand and charged with unfathomable speed as if space had been compressed. You may have seen through my shadow step, but how will your skill with the sword compare? Knox wondered as she effortlessly met Stella's sword with her dagger despite her speed. Her technique is sloppy and lacks strength. Knox grinned as she deflected Stella's blade. Deciding a dagger would put her at a disadvantage in a duel, she replaced it with a sword and went on the offensive. Stella seemed unfazed, and the two engaged in a flurry of attacks that filled the already chaotic room with clanks. Knox dipped in and out of the room's shadows and tried to shadow step a few more times, but Stella always managed to deflect anything she tried. As time passed, Knox grew increasingly concerned about her young opponent. How is this possible? Is she some prodigy or sword god? Stella matched her speed and attacks perfectly as if she were fighting a mirror version of herself. Copying my attack pattern, are you? Then how about you face my shadows? I doubt you can perfectly copy 10 versions of me. Knox leapt back and mentally reached out to all the shadows lurking in the room. There weren't many due to Lucius's stupid glowing armor, but there were still some. Much like the mist phantoms that had perished to Lucius's light, shadowy beings emerged from under the crushed table and the room's nooks and crannies. They all bore the same bulky silhouette as Knox as they encircled Stella. The blonde girl seemed unimpressed by Knox's backup as she just stared at her with a calm expression, as if everything was within her control. Her silver spatial ring then flashed, and a dagger with a black wooden handle appeared in her empty hand. She then opened her palm, and the dagger floated up beside her. TSK, this is why I hate spatial cultivators, always with the darn telekinesis and hyperperception. Not to mention, the higher level ones like Hammond can teleport away at any time. Assuming they don't get clawed to death by a void creature. Stella tapped the dagger with her finger, and its blade ignited with purple soul fire. She then closed her tranquil eyes. And Knox saw the dagger's tip rotate in the air to face the incoming shadows like a homing arrow. Shit. Everyone attack her now. Quickly. Knox mentally ordered, and the shadows obeyed by rushing toward Stella. Knox also used the opportunity to vanish into the background and look for an opening. She just needed to spot a moment of weakness brought on by her many shadows to strike Stella with Shadow Step. Stella clicked her fingers, and the floating dagger whizzed around her, slicing reality in its wake and obliterating the shadows from existence in one fell swoop. What happened to my shadows? How can a star core cultivator wield such power? Knox's eyes widened at the aftermath. Those shadow versions of herself had taken a considerable portion of her chi and were supposed to be an unrelenting mob that would distract Stella. So, to delete them from existence as a mere first-stage star core cultivator made no sense. Knox narrowed her eyes and followed the flow of the chi in the room. It was chaotic and all over the place, with so many star core cultivators fighting in one room and trying to suppress each other with their own gravity, but something stood out as odd to Knox. How is there suddenly 10 times more spatial chi than all the other affinities combined? There's no way Stella could produce that much spatial chi unless she's going supernova. So who is the culprit? Is there another spatial affinity cultivator lurking nearby? Knox's eyes flickered through the room to locate the source. Naturally, the first place she checked was the corner where she had kicked the dimension locker, which was supposed to restrict outside interference. To her surprise, she saw the demoness had crawled over and held the shattered marble in her hand. Diana let out a groan of pain as her hand collapsed to the ground, and she passed out. A sudden presence that matched Knox's own blanketed the whole room, and a giant portal manifested over Diana. From within the distorted rift emerged an enormous black wooden arm that picked up Diana's broken body and carefully took it away. What kind of monster have I angered? Knox could tell the new presence was furious as the spatial chi filling the room, especially around the rifts, was chaotic. Upon the rift snapping closed, a new one of similar size manifested over Lucius. The glowing merchant was busy fighting the Silver Spire servant, who had coated his entire body in a suit of liquid silver armor and was wielding a mace while protecting a badly beaten elder Margaret, who was missing an arm and covered in burns. "Lucius, look out!" Knox shouted as she saw a giant ashen-furred spider crawl out of the newly formed portal. Lucius heeded her warning, looked up, and was greeted by the spirit beast opening its maw. Thousands of tiny ashen spiders poured upon him like a tidal wave. Lucius waved his sword around to no avail as the living wave of ashen spiders was dead set on devouring his flesh. "Knox, help me!" Lucius cried out as he shot out random beams of light that melted through stone while trying to throw off the spiders latching onto his arms. "Shit, what should I do? That spider looks like some guardian beast that might even be in the nascent soul realm. What the fuck is going on, and who is behind the Ashlock Trading Company to command such a powerful guardian beast? Should I flee? But then I'll have to forfeit the other earring. Actually, can I even flee? If a powerful spatial cultivator is on their side, my only chance of winning is teaming up with Lucius and standing our ground until they run out of chi and can't chase after us. Your opponent is me, Stella said calmly as she turned on her heel and looked directly at Knox through the darkness with closed eyes and the aflame dagger's tip pointing straight at her. "I will kill you myself for what you've done here today." I can see Stella's sword shaking and sweat accumulating on her forehead. She is nearing her limit. If I kill her quickly, I can rush over and help Lucius, and then we can get out of here. "Very well, Rosalind, or should I call you Stella?" Knox said as she emerged from the shadows with a smile and cracked her neck as her star core blazed with power. Before, she had been holding back in fear of wasting her cultivation, but now it was time to go all out. She refused to die here today to the mysterious Ashlock Trading Company. Chapter 183, Sun God. Everything happened so fast. The meeting had been going according to plan. The merchants seemed interested in the pills, and the reactions were positive. However, when Stella presented the poisonous pills alongside the antidote, everything went to shit. Stella was suddenly screaming, there was a blinding flash of light from Lucius, and once it faded, Ashlock saw via a root snaking through a crack in the floor that Hammond was trying to make a rift to escape. Moving on instinct, as there was no time to assess the situation, Ashlock tried to suppress or disrupt the rift with his spatial chi. But Hammond had far greater dominion over the surrounding spatial chi than even Ashlock and could supply the rift with his own internal chi. "Buck, I really need to work on increasing my cultivation stage. It doesn't matter how large my chi reserves are if someone can seize control of my own chi." Ashlock cursed as his vision blurred, and he returned to Red Vine Peak. Thankfully, he had prepared countermeasures in advance for a situation like this. "Chaos, execute the spatial cultivator opening a rift, and do not let any of the merchants escape," Ashlock commanded his fourth stage star core ent, standing on his mountain peak. He had kept his ents hidden from Whitestone Palace as he didn't want to expose their existence to the merchants or scare them off, as this was supposed to be a peaceful talk. But sadly, Stella's fears about the ruthlessness of the merchants had come true. Chaos acknowledged the order by disconnecting herself from the black root, charging her up with void chi at great expense to Ashlock's own chi reserves, and then vanished into the void. Where did she go? Ashlock tried to quickly locate Chaos nearby, but the void chi made it nearly impossible to detect the ent with spiritual sense. A property of void chi that made the ent an even more terrifying predator and the perfect ent for assassinating a spatial cultivator. Unable to locate Chaos, Ashlock decided to return his sights to the meeting room and saw the stone wall explode, revealing Chaos. How did she cross an entire mountain range in an instant? Ashlock had expected Chaos to arrive within a minute, but it had been instantaneous. Per his orders, the void ent blurred toward Hammond and ruthlessly cleaved him into pieces like a guillotine without making a sound. Ashlock had to admit he was surprised at how quickly Hammond was slaughtered. Was it because the spatial cultivator hadn't seen Chaos coming? Ashlock had analyzed the merchants when they first arrived and had concluded they were all at the peak of the Star Core realm, far above Chaos and even his own cultivation base. So, how could Chaos kill him in one swipe? Was void chi really that overpowered? I bloody hope it's strong considering how much chi I spent converting into void chi for Chaos, Ashlock muttered as he looked at the shredded remains of Hammond that plastered the white walls like some accursed art piece. He hated to admit it, but all he felt from the sight was a deep hunger rather than disgust. He couldn't help but mentally lick his lips. That was the flesh and blood of a cultivator far above him, and it was saturated in spatial chi like an exotic sauce. My cultivation would soar leaps and bounds if only I could get a taste. Wait, what is that? Ashlock concentrated his spiritual sight on the splattered remains surrounding Chaos and noticed something shiny, possibly metallic, within the blood. Perhaps a spatial ring. Using telekinesis to push what was left of Hammond's arm aside, he saw a familiar red maple leaf earring, and everything started to make sense. Quickly making a tiny portal beside it, he retrieved the earring and returned it to Red Vine Peak for safekeeping while holding back his festering rage. Stella seldom took the earrings off since he had gifted them to her as a child, which could only mean one thing: Hammond had taken them by force, which must have been the cause of her screams. The merchants had betrayed their trust, tried to steal Stella's earrings, and hurt her. Chaos, Ashlock said through their mental link as he tried to quell his rising rage. I command you to kill the other two merchants. Ashlock felt Chaos acknowledge his order but then went silent, like a phone disconnecting. What the? Ashlock tried to look back in the room, but something was blocking him. Confused, he switched his view to be above the palace with Eye of the Tree God and was baffled to see a strange black bubble surrounding the entire east wing. Did Chaos create this barrier so nobody can escape? Ashlock wondered as he tried to penetrate the bubble with his spiritual sense to no avail. He could try to destroy the bubble with his overwhelming chi reserves, or have Zeus blast a hole through it with heavenly lightning, but if Chaos made it to stop Knox from sneaking away, he didn't want to allow her to escape. Time passed, and upon closer inspection of the bubble, Ashlock came to a terrible realization. The shroud over the east wing wasn't made out of void chi but rather a strange type of energy that he couldn't understand. Therefore, Chaos hadn't been the one to put it up, as she could only utilize the void chi he had provided her. However, right as Ashlock was about to cast Progeny Dominion to gain control of a nearby offspring and rain all hell on the bubble, it popped and faded away on its own, allowing him to flood the entire room with his presence and see what the hell was going on in there. To his horror, Diana was dead. Her smashed up and broken body was the first thing that greeted him. Black blood soaked her clothes like the bubonic plague, and her once beautiful feathered wings jutted off at odd angles. She was face down with her arms spread out, and in her open and limp palm were black shards of glass that Ashlock didn't recognize. What the fuck had happened in the few minutes he was locked out by that accursed bubble? Diana and Stella had been joking and laughing about this meeting just a few hours ago. How could she now be an unmoving corpse pummeled into the floor like trash? No, he didn't want to accept it. Diana, you aren't dead, right? Ashlock uttered in disbelief within her mind. Show me something. Anything. Hey. She remained lifeless. The mountain trembled as Ashlock's enormous star core flared up, and his cursed blood boiled. Seeing Diana's body ruined made him want to scream into the void and smash something. With his emotions running amok and having nowhere to go other than down into his roots, his offspring embraced his rage in their own way. Their leaves rustled violently to mirror their father, and the usually peaceful and pleasant mountain range of scarlet trees took on an air of wrath. Birds fled to the skies en masse as Ashlock's offspring began to awaken their egos in light of their parents' sorrow. Columns of fire shot into the sky alongside swirling clouds of mist. The area around the trees with spatial chi rippled and cracked, and the grove filled with dreamweaver orchids began displaying illusions of enraged beasts that howled at the setting sun. Meanwhile, Ashlock wasn't paying attention to the vast impact of his grief, as his entire focus was on Diana. Memories flashed through his mind and only furthered his frustrations. She had grown to become someone special to him, and he had cherished her presence. He knew this was a brutal world with death around every corner. Hell, the cold loneliness of death had almost claimed him once before. But this was too soon. Diana still had so much to see and accomplish. Please wake up. Ashlock tore his sights away from the sad sight and desperately began flipping through his list of skills and even brought up his production menus to see if he had any way to heal her but came up with nothing. Nothing. There were healing pills, but Diana didn't exactly look in a state to eat any pill he floated over to her. It had only been a few seconds since the bubble collapsed, but it already felt like hours to Ashlock. His mind was so overwhelmed with so many conflicting emotions that he didn't know what to do and realized he was panicking. Calm down. Now is not the time to allow yourself to get distracted. He felt his mind grow cold as he suppressed his reasonable human emotions to the corner of his mind and focused on damage control. Titus, retrieve Diana's body for me. Ashlock willed a rift into existence, and the enormous end reached down through the conjured portal and carefully raised Diana. Titus then walked across the mountain peak and set Diana down against the tree she always used to cultivate under. Larry, who had been awaiting orders from Ashlock, crawled over and inspected Diana with his many eyes. Master, what in the heavens happened to her? May I be of assistance somehow? I don't know. Give me a moment to think. Ashlock replied colder than he intended. Actually, Larry. Yes, Master. Larry replied gruffly, just say the word, and it shall be done. Your wish is my command. I noticed in the corner of my vision that Sebastian was fighting one of the merchants while I was retrieving Diana's body. I don't know the situation over there, but I doubt it's any good if Diana ended up like this even while in her demon form. Can you go and help them while I deal with this? Oh, and protect Stella if you can. As the Master commands. I shall rain hell upon thy foes and protect the mistress with my humble life, Larry declared. The halo of ash orbiting his crown of horns began spinning faster, and he started to emit a murderous presence that matched his terrifying form. I appreciate it, Ashlock said as he opened a rift for his guardian beast, which the spider promptly crawled through without hesitation. Once it snapped closed, Kaida fell from the tree's canopy and slithered toward the motionless Diana with evident concern. The enormous ebb and flow serpent sovereign had grown considerably since Ashlock had last checked on him and looked capable of swallowing Diana whole. The snake coiled around the tree's base and Diana's body while his tongue flickered at Diana's cheek, hissing softly and looking at her with his golden eyes. Kaida, she got killed by the merchants. Ashlock told the worried snake, I know you are still young and likely lack the power, but is there any way you can revive her? The snake gave Diana a long look but eventually lowered his head and shook it sadly in an oddly human way. Ashlock barely managed to rein in his grief at the sight of Kaida and Diana. Since there was nothing left he could do, Ashlock was about to switch his focus back to the White Stone Palace, as he hadn't had time to check if the others were still alive. When he noticed her finger twitch. It was subtle, just the tiniest of movement to the point he almost second-guessed himself. But then it happened again. Wait. Diana. Are you alive? Ashlock couldn't believe it. She didn't appear to be breathing, and her body looked like a bus had run it over. But that was, without a doubt, her moving. Of course, it could have just been a random muscle spasm. So, to make sure, Ashlock quickly split his trunk to reveal his demonic eye and gazed upon Diana. His demonic gaze was narrow, and everything became tinted with a red hue. But this mutation served an essential purpose other than scaring people. He could see the flow of chi, and to his utter surprise, there was the faintest evidence of chi circulation in Diana's body. Upon another second of observation, Ashlock noticed that the abundance of water chi around Diana had shifted the careful balance of demonic and water chi within her body. Due to her body being so destroyed, the flow was heavily restricted, but it was there. If chi can flow, her soul core can't be shattered. Her soul is still there. It's so dim that it's impossible to make out, but it's still somewhere. Ashlock quickly entered his inventory and dumped a pile of healing pills next to Kaida. Kaida, she's still barely alive, but if she doesn't get healed up within the next few minutes, I fear she will truly pass, Ashlock said in haste. Feed these pills to her and try to draw out a healing or chi gathering array with your ink. I will be right back with a better solution, I promise. Ashlock left Kaida to tend to Diana and returned to the room. There were 2 ongoing fights. To his relief, Stella seemed alive, but her expression was strange. She stared intently at a dark corner of the room with a calm face and raised sword. Stella, I'm here now, Ashlock said within her mind, just call out my name if you need any help. She gave a slight nod but otherwise hardly reacted except for wincing slightly as he quickly withdrew his presence from her mind. He would offer her more help, but the other side of the room was a disaster and needed his immediate attention. Elder Margaret, what the hell happened to you? Ashlock asked in disbelief as he noticed her pitiful state. The usually uptight woman who reminded him of an English noblewoman with how she conducted herself was ragged and even missing her right arm entirely. She was sitting propped up against a wall, cowering behind Larry and Sebastian, wrapped in bloody cloths and looking terrible, with nasty burns covering nearly every inch of exposed skin. Oh, you know, Elder Margaret chuckled dryly, which caused her face to twist in pain. I dare to face the sun as nothing more than a candle flame. That was true. Elder Margaret was only in the 8th stage of the soul fire realm and was, therefore, more than an entire realm of cultivation below Lucius. But I wanted to live, Elder Margaret smiled sadly, showing a row of bloodied teeth. How can I see out the young one's training if I'm a cold corpse? Ashlock appreciated the strangely optimistic outlook, but he really needed her to leave before she got killed by a stray attack. Finding Chaos in a similarly bad condition but still able to move, he ordered the Void Ent to go with Elder Margaret through a portal he quickly conjured and then snapped closed while the entire room shuddered from the ongoing battle. With them out of the way and back at Red Vine Peak, Ashlock could now focus entirely on eliminating these merchants who dared to beat Diana to within an inch of her life and might still die without urgent healing. His focus naturally landed on Lucius, a tall, dark-skinned warrior wearing polished metal armor that glowed like a mirror in the sun and wielding two swords that appeared to be made from condensed light as if they had been forged from a star. Meanwhile, his opponent was an exhausted-looking Sebastian and a very enraged Larry. The giant spider who dominated the room had unleashed a tidal wave of ash spiders that seemed tiny compared to Larry but were far larger and more robust than any spider Ashlock had seen back on Earth. Lucius howled in pain as one of the hundreds of spiders latched onto his shoulder and ripped off his ear. Before the spider could enjoy its victory snack, a beam of light discharged from the man's glowing armor and pierced a hole straight through its head, liquefying its brain and causing the now headless spider to slide down and join the growing pile of dead. Healing glow. Lucius shouted as he deflected a floating snake of liquid silver, aiming straight for his throat with his armored arm and struck one of Larry's limbs with his light sword. A warm glow appeared on the left side of his head, and to Ashlock's amazement, his torn-off ear began regrowing. Larry reeled back with a hiss from the strike but didn't seem to suffer too serious of a wound due to his ashen fur that shimmered as if floating like armor to dampen the blows. Kill him. Ashlock shouted through his mental link with Larry as he saw Lucius's ear fully regrow. If I can turn Lucius into an ent, I can use that healing glow power on Diana and Elder Margaret. Puny human, it seems my master has sentenced you to a swift death, Larry decreed in the ancient tongue as the ashen crown orbiting his horn spun even faster, and Lucius seemed to buckle slightly from the sudden pressure. I care not for your pathetic master, Lucius surprisingly answered in the ancient tongue. I only respect one God, and it shines brighter than any other. Oh, hear my plea, heavenly son, and bathe me in your radiant light, for I am your humble vessel on this mortal plane and wish to wield your wrath to strike down these fools that deny your warmth, Lucius roared to the heavens. A second later, the ceiling exploded as a beam of concentrated sunlight from the setting sun illuminated his form. He screamed as the sunlight scorched his skin, burned away his hair, and began to melt his armor. What kind of power is this? Ashlock was in shock as Lucius's star core now seemed to be directly linked to the literal sun, providing him with a bottomless energy source. Lucius eventually stopped screaming in agony and effortlessly stood up to his full height despite Larry's suppression. His eyes were like headlights, and streams of golden light lurked below his charred skin. He cracked his neck, rolled his shoulders, flexed his fingers, and grinned. He then slowly began to walk toward Larry while raising his arm. Perish before the blinding light, you filthy creature of the night. Larry, dodge. Ashlock yelled as he sensed the absurd amount of light chi filling the room that was many times more chi than Ashlock had used to create chaos with his SS-grade skill Necroflora Sovereign, all condensing into a single attack on Lucius's palm. Ashlock realized that he had to stop this attack no matter what. Otherwise, not only was everyone in that room dead, but the entire Whitestone Palace would be no more. This simply wasn't the level of power a mere man should wield as it belonged in the realm of the gods. Chapter 184, Final Stand. Lucius felt immortal, which wasn't so far from the truth. So long as the radiant glow of the sun empowered his mortal vessel, he could tap into a limitless power source, allowing him to spend light chi without restraint. Healing glow covered every inch of his body at all times, and his costly attack techniques were now free. However, it was a power that hadn't come cheap, as he had stunted his cultivation at the peak of the star core realm and pledged his soul to the eternal light. With his healing abilities, his body hardly aged despite centuries passing, but Lucius was not and never would be truly immortal. By his cultivation base stalling in the star core realm, he could never enter the nascent soul realm and create an infant soul, which other cultivators used to escape the shackles of time. Yes, crawl away, you disgusting creature. Lucius sneered as he raised his hand and pulled on the bottomless well of chi that his god had provided him with. He had only accepted his god's warmth a few times, as it would leave his body a broken mess that would take months to heal once the sun dipped below the horizon, but that was a sacrifice he was willing to make. Now I just need to spend a moment letting the sun alter my body so it can wield my god's wrath, and then I can exterminate these fools. To Lucius's surprise, the giant spider stopped fleeing and turned to face him despite the rapidly expanding ball of pure light chi gathering on his palm that would be enough to wipe out a small sect once fully charged. As the beast accepted its death, Lucius narrowed his glowing eyes at the spider. It had seemed so intelligent and even capable of speaking the ancient tongue, albeit with a terrible accent, so why would it try and face someone wielding the power of a god? Does its beastly intellect fail to comprehend his power? Lucius was about to cook the stupid thing to death, but a ripple of spatial chi on another level to anything Hammond had emitted drew his attention. 3 enormous portals materialized simultaneously on the palace's roof, and Lucius felt the sudden presence of 2 beings in the star core realm and 1 soul fire, but they didn't feel human. How are there more of those strange creatures? Lucius looked up at the giant hole in the roof where he could directly gaze upon the setting sun and then frowned when he saw 3 heads appear and look down at him. One was a giant marble statue with eyes of heavenly gold and white leaves forming a glorious head of hair and a magnificent beard. Beside the living statue was a titan of black wood twice the size of the already colossal marble statue that could stand beside the palace and casually gaze in. This black wood titan had eyes of blazing lilac fire, and a large canopy of scarlet leaves sprouted from its hunched back, which cast a looming shadow upon Lucius and blocked out his god's radiant light. The third and final head that looked down at him as if he were an ant was a beige-colored wooden turtle, which made his skin crawl as it had no apparent eyes, yet it had human-like hair in the form of black vines and a weirdly human form as if it were some cursed mismatch between turtle and man. Do you think a mere walking tree can stifle me from my god's light? Lucius pulled upon his connection with the sun, and the beam's intensity increased tenfold, illuminating the evening sky and causing the scarlet leaves on the titan's back to ignite into a spontaneous blaze. The titan's bark also seemed to show signs of burning, but a sudden burst of lilac soul fire that covered its back saved it. The white marble statue pointed its finger to the sky, and darkened clouds began to form on the horizon that were soon filled with flashing lights and roaring thunder. Is that statue a reanimated ancestor of the Skyrend family? Lucius wondered as he raised his palm that held the charging light beam to eliminate these troublemakers. Although his attack wasn't fully charged, he decided it was best to eradicate these strange beings in service to the Ashlock Trading Company before dealing with the spider. He first targeted the white marble statue as he didn't like the look of the storm system forming overhead. His entire arm lit up, and a beam of focused light shot from his palm in complete silence and instantaneously obliterated the marble statue's raised arm and brightened the evening sky. The beacon of light pierced through the distant clouds, and the storm system began to calm down and dissipate, but Lucius wasn't done. He wanted that thing dead. So, with the light beam from his hand still going and piercing the heavens, he slowly lowered his hand and enjoyed the overwhelming power as the ray carved into the marble statue's chest. Strangely, the statue didn't even flinch while being burned alive. Its heavenly golden eyes remained fixated on Lucius as if it were mocking him. Does it not feel pain? Lucius decided to test that theory as he raised the scorching beam up and went for the thing's smug face. Still, it didn't flinch, even as its face was scorched in too. In fact, it smiled at him, and in another act of defiance, it raised its remaining arm and called on the clouds once more. Bastard, are you mocking me? Lucius yelled as he raised his other arm and was about to put everything he could into blasting this fucker into the afterlife when something barreled into him, throwing him off balance. Who dares? Lucius grimaced as he felt a wound in his side rapidly close up due to the permanent healing blow. Only now did he notice the entire room had become engulfed in a storm of swirling ash that encircled him like a hurricane. The spirit beast was missing, but its presence was still overwhelmingly there, lurking deep in the ash. Suddenly, 2 people came flying out of the ash. One was shrouded in flames of darkness and flanked by shadow copies, while the other was a blonde-haired girl on the defensive, effortlessly deflecting every blow with a calm expression. Lucius instantly recognized the 2 as Knox and Rosalind and was somewhat surprised to see Rosalind holding up on her own. The sounds of clashing blades faded into the background as their fight took them back into the swirling ash, leaving Lucius alone and still confused about what had stabbed him in the side. Had the void creature recovered somehow? That was the only thing he had seen so far that genuinely worried him and might be able to kill him even while harnessing the unlimited light of a star. A sudden whistling noise drew his attention as a sword of excellent craftsmanship engulfed in lilac flames lashed out from the ash to his left, held by what could only be described as a black thorn-covered vine. Moving instinctually, Lucius tilted his head to the side and winced as the sword, traveling at surprising speed, cleanly sliced through his cheek and reeled back into the swirling ash. "You rat bastard using cheap tricks," Lucius cursed as the wound healed almost as fast as it was inflicted, but that wasn't the point. What in the nine realms was that? Even trees were attacking him now. Or was that another one of these strange beings? Glancing up, his eyes met with the Black Wood Titan. Had it been the instigator? The vine color and flame matched, so it was plausible. Lucius rolled his shoulders to calm himself. Whatever that was, it would take many such swords to stab him all at once to have any lasting impact, so he returned his attention to the hole in the roof and noticed the clouds blanketed the entire sky overhead. The Black Wood Titan had also put its whole body over the hole, and the strange beige wood turtle shook the palace as giant rock walls from all sides loomed into view. Is that turtle trying to make a dome? Are they trying to trap me? Me? Are they fools? So long as I have the light, they will perish before my burning glory. Lucius pulled on the beam of light, still piercing through the clouds and shining on the Black Titan's back and burning its bark, yet it still stood there dumbly as if blindly following the orders of an unwise master. Does it want to die? The light gave Lucius unlimited power, the blazing glory of a literal star. It filled his body to the brim with so much chi he didn't even know what to do with it. And then it was gone in an instant. Lucius's spotlight was shut off as if day had turned to night. Had another god snuffed out the star like a mortal would to a candle flame? Lucius's eyes widened at the storm overhead that had grown suddenly dark. The rock walls connected and fully formed a dome of gray stone, and the swirling ashen storm entirely engulfed him all at once. No. Lucius raised his hand to the sky and felt no warmth. The light was gone. He almost immediately felt his body explode with pain as light chi was forcefully pulled from his star core to compensate for the lack of light from his god that had been fueling his transcendent form. They were never trying to trap him but rather deprive him of light. Lucius clenched his teeth as he felt his healing glow wear off, and his body began to break down and wither away from the rampant light chi still left in his body. His puny mortal vessel wasn't designed to hold this amount of chi. If he didn't expend it soon, he would involuntarily go supernova sooner or later. Raising his trembling hands to the sky, he unleashed one of his most costly techniques, disintegration ray. Lucius hissed through the pain as a beam of light over a meter wide superheated the swirling ash, blasted through the rock dome, and pierced the clouds, causing cinders and molten rock to rain upon him. None of this mattered to Lucius as he cast Flash Step to instantly travel via the ray of light to stand upon the dome. So long as there was light, he could move short distances at the snap of a finger. His gaze drifted to the setting sun on the distant horizon, but before he could embrace the light again, that accursed marble statue's head popped up with a grin as if saying hello and consumed his entire view. Get out of the way, you stupid golem. Lucius reeled back his fist to finish the job when his world went white, followed by roaring thunder as heavenly lightning arced out from the clouds above and struck him square in the chest, sending him falling back down into the hell that was the darkened room. He crashed onto the palace room's floor and was left in a smoldering crater, looking up at the darkened sky. He saw the earthen dome rumble closed, sealing the hole he had created, followed by a heap of ash that descended on him. Knox. Lucius cried out to his only ally while coughing up blood. His entire body was in terrible pain, and he was seriously growing concerned. In his current state, regaining his connection with the sun seemed his only hope, which made no sense. How could he be losing to some unknown group in some backwater demonic sect? He had walked these lands for thousands of years, delved and conquered treacherous rifts single-handedly, and even wiped out a family from the Celestial Empire. His spatial rings flashed as healing pills of various kinds appeared, and he gulped them down without a second thought, anything to dull the pain so he could concentrate on escaping. There's a decent chance the statue can't blast me with lightning of that caliber so soon. If I get up there and reconnect with the sun, I can try and locate that spatial cultivator whose presence is blanketing the entire mountain, kill them, and then escape. Lucius had been foolish and tried to escape from a spatial cultivator once in the past and would never make such an amateur mistake again. While he had been on the run for a week straight, expending his chi to slaughter monsters and Flash Step to cover as much ground as possible, the spatial cultivator had been relaxing and drinking tea back home, waiting for him to be worn out before utilizing a teleportation array and appearing before him a week later fully rested. Shaking his head and pushing himself up from the ground, Lucius barely twisted his body to the side in time to dodge multiple tree vine-wielded swords aiming for his neck. He tried to flatten the swords with his star core gravity as they retreated back into the ash. But the spatial chi-coated vines made it impossible to wrestle away control of them as he had with spatial cultivators in the past who bragged about controlling 100 swords with telekinesis. They appear without warning, Lucius mumbled as he scrutinized the ash swirling around him. It did an excellent job of masking the tiny ripples of spatial chi from the portals closing and the swords disappearing again. In fact, it did such a good job that Lucius almost missed 8 portals opening in a circle around him. He enshrouded his legs with chi and leapt up at the last second. There was a loud clang as the 8 swords impacted each other just below his feet, and the many vines became briefly entangled. Ag, Lucius hissed in pain as he landed awkwardly to the side. His body struggled to contain the light chi running rampant as he hadn't had enough time to adapt his spirit root to handle the sudden influx of light chi, and his star core didn't have enough capacity to contain it all. So why should he hold back any longer? Knox, brace yourself, Lucius shouted as his eyes and mouth leaked light as if a sun was trying to escape from within. I'm going to end this myself. He had refrained from unleashing everything as it would greatly diminish Knox's ability to fight, but Knox was no longer his concern. The useless bitch was struggling to kill Rosalind, who was barely in the star core realm and was even an alchemist. The blonde girl had likely never learned to fight and spent years with her nose buried in books. Lucius narrowed his glowing eyes. Things weren't adding up. It had been Knox's idea to come here, and she had kept the real reason secret from me, yet Hammond seemed to know something I didn't. But then he died instantly, and now Knox has been wasting time fighting with the far weaker Rosalind one-on-one rather than lending me a hand while I get tag-teamed by multiple people. Is this a betrayal? Is Knox trying to kill me either directly or indirectly? It wouldn't be the first time he was betrayed, and it likely wouldn't be the last. Lucius's skin began to glow as he stepped forward, and the stone floor cracked beneath his steps. A blade of light manifested in both of his hands, and he activated healing glow without restraint. He then turned in the direction he heard fighting. Blazing radiance, Lucius uttered with as much enthusiasm as one would when describing the weather, and a blast of light pulsed out of his body in every direction. The blaze disintegrated the swirling ash, the walls exploded outward, and the ceiling collapsed. But Lucius didn't care for the destruction. With the annoying ash and confining walls gone, he could now get a clear view of everything. With the entire east wing of the palace now destroyed, there was nothing but a mountain peak of rubble that gave way to a bustling forest of scarlet leaves and black-barked trees that went down the mountainside until Dark Light City in the far distance. And scattered against these trees was everyone else. They seemed to have suffered severe burns, but Lucius could see them all moving. Meaning they were alive. TSK, annoying, Lucius clicked his tongue as he used Flash Step to get closer and then caught something in the corner of his eye. Knox was fleeing into the forest. You. Betraying bitch. Lucius felt the words die in his throat as a sudden pressure not only descended on him but the entire mountain peak. As his knees buckled under the pressure, his head snapped toward the source, which turned out to be an unassuming demonic tree like the rest of the forest suddenly ablaze with lilac soul fire that Rosalind was leaning against. If things couldn't get any more strange, Lucius felt a chill run down his spine as a mysterious white fog appeared at the edge of his consciousness, and then 1,000 voices spoke to him. This ends here. Chapter 185, Delicious Meal. Ashlock watched in horror as his well-thought-out plan that utilized everything at his disposal to keep Lucius away from the sun was triumphed by nothing other than overwhelming power. Lucius had turned himself into what could only be described as a walking light bomb, instantly obliterating a large portion of the White Stone Palace and sending everyone still fighting flying out into the demonic tree forest alongside a wave of superheated ash. Without Larry's ash absorbing much of the attack, even with their star core realm bodies and soul fire, they likely would have perished in the blazing radiance. Thankfully, they all escaped with their lives, which just so happened to include Knox, who recovered faster than the rest. The bulky woman hissed in pain as she staggered to her feet while everyone else remained on the jagged stone among the tree roots. Is that bastard crazy? Knox's trembling hand emerged from the folds of her cloak. It was severely burned, with the skin a bright red and cracking. Her face had followed a similar fate, but it was mostly hidden under a hood. She coughed up blackened blood in her hand and wiped her face. Ugh, this poison. She looked around the clearing as molten ash fell like rain. Ashlock followed her gaze, which landed on Stella. A crooked grin appeared as Knox summoned a dagger to her hand. All of this is your fault. I don't even care about the artifact anymore. Only your death will satisfy me for making me waste a dimension locker and months of cultivation. Even though she was injured, Knox was still a peak star core cultivator adept at assassination that could instantly decapitate Stella, so Ashlock didn't hesitate in casting Progeny Dominion on the tree Stella was resting against. He had been saving his S-grade skill for a moment like this. Progeny selected, initiating soul transfer. Soul fragmented, damage to soul mitigated. A tidal wave of power passed over the entire mountain range as a fractured piece of Ashlock's soul traversed the root network to the glee of his children and united with his offspring, turning the unassuming demonic tree into an extension of himself, much like Lucius had done for his son God. Connection complete, time till sundown 010. The tree's branches and leaves blazed with lilac soul fire as Ashlock unleashed everything on Knox through his progeny. Knox stumbled back in shock as Ashlock cast abyssal whispers. His presence bloomed within her mind as a withering mass of enraged eyes and 1,000 voices screamed, "Die!" As the woman stood there bewildered, the ground before her exploded as many thorn-covered vines emerged and tried to entangle her, but they were blocked by a shadow clone that materialized at the last second, absorbing the attack and allowing her to use Shadow Step to vanish into the darkness. Stella didn't react to everything happening as she was completely passed out. Lucius's light blast had burned off half her hair, and her body hadn't fared much better. Her sleeping face was twisted in pain, and her breathing was erratic. I don't care if you're the descendant of a sword goddess or some kind of demon in human skin like Diana, Knox whispered as she climbed out of Stella's shadow and raised her sword, but I'm never one to leave loose ends. No. Ashlock roared in Knox's mind as he cast Consuming Abyss. A lake of void chi flowed out from the tree's roots, and from the void shot out hundreds of tendrils. Knox's eyes widened as she blocked the onslaught with her sword coated in flames of darkness, but the void tendrils cared not for her puny attempts to stop them as they devoured the sword and even her hand for good measure. Howling in pain, Knox stumbled back and almost tripped over another tree root as the ground exploded and more black vines covered in thorns rushed her. Shadow. Cover me, Knox said while coughing up more blood and turning to flee into the forest. Ashlock watched in surprise as Knox's shadow actually detached itself from her and stood up as if it were a real person. The shadow was clearly far stronger at a glance than the other shadow clones she had conjured previously, as it quickly grabbed his vines and ripped them apart. Let's see what's stronger. Ashlock spoke into the mind of the fleeing Knox, my void or your shadow. Knox didn't even look over her shoulder as her shadow was dragged down by void tendrils and devoured in the lake. Plus 427 SC. Ashlock was surprised by the notification. Does that mean a part of her soul was in that shadow? Ashlock quickly checked on his system. Idolatry daily sign-in system. Day, 3541. Daily credit, 14. Sacrifice credit, 824. Sign-in. It wasn't a bug in the system. I really did get points for that. Ashlock looked back to where Knox had been, but she was gone. Vanished into the darkness of the forest. Ashlock spread out his spiritual sense but struggled to locate her. Where did she go? To his surprise, the answer to his question came from an unexpected source. His children. A small group of them further down the mountain were crying out for his attention. His vision blurred through the root network, and he found himself dumbfounded. Since when had all of his children surpassed the soul-forged realm, formed their soul cores, and reached the soul fire realm? Before, it had just been a set few trees here and there that he had carefully cultivated like those on his mountain peak, with the rest near the peak of the chi realm and still condensing their affinities and forming their soul cores. They all seemed to cheer excitedly when his spiritual sight arrived at a small clearing near the mountain's base where Knox was leaning against one of the demonic trees and gulping down the antidote Stella had given her less than an hour earlier. Now, how can I kill her? Ashlock pondered as he quickly considered his options. With Knox so far away, his only way to attack her would be through portals, which wouldn't be enough. He was still 5 stages in the star core realm lower than her, even if she was poisoned and weakened. I could send Titus after her, but I need him to deal with Lucius. Oh shit. Ashlock forgot the walking demigod of light was still up at the mountain peak, so he reluctantly left Knox alone. My children, keep track of her as she tries to escape. I will capture her shortly. Ashlock felt a wave of agreement as his vision shifted back to where he had left Stella only seconds before. Lucius, thankfully, hadn't made his move yet as he was buckling under the pressure of his presence from using his S-grade skill. Immortal, may I be of service? The Grand Elder said with a hint of rage as he floated next to his progeny. Ashlock hadn't noticed the man's arrival as he was focused on Lucius, who blanketed the whole area in his light. The Grand Elder looked terribly solemn while standing upon his flaming sword with his hands clasped behind his back, and his gaze fixated on the destroyed eastern wing of the White Stone Palace. His home. Yes, Ashlock replied, I will deal with Lucius. I need you to go kill Knox for me. She stole something from Stella that needs to be returned. The Grand Elder's solemn expression cracked and twisted. They dare to steal from the mistress. Where should I go to find this wretch? Look to the forest, Ashlock said, the trees will guide you, for she lurks in the shadows. The Grand Elder nodded and took off down the mountain on his sword in search of Knox, leaving Ashlock to focus on Lucius. Without delay, Ashlock used abyssal whispers to force his way into Lucius's mind. However, to his surprise, he could not manifest much of a presence other than some swirling white fog, as within Lucius's consciousness was nothing but a blinding white light that was impossible to penetrate. This ends here, Ashlock shouted with all the intensity he could muster in Lucius's mind. Lucius laughed as he stood despite his pressure and cracked his neck. I'll be the decider of that, he said as he basked in the rays from the distant sun half set behind the mountains. You're the spatial cultivator, right? Hiding in a tree. Lucius tilted his head as he raised his palm. Then I am going to need you to burn for me. Jeb. Ashlock shouted through his connection, and the ground below Lucius crumbled, making the man lose his footing, causing the light beam to barely miss his progeny's trunk, but it did eradicate a few of its branches. The end, which was a strange mixture of a human and a turtle, sprung from the ground below in a shower of dirt and tried to pull Lucius down into the earthy depths. Get off me, Lucius punched down with a glowing fist, caving Jeb's face and pummeling the ant back into the ground. Titus, trap him, Ashlock commanded, and before his sentence was even done, Lucius found himself crushed under the Titan's palm like a bug. Zeus, get ready to blast him with lightning, Ashlock said as he opened rifts and teleported his 8 swords from Red Vine Peak to his progeny. The void lake around the tree also expanded over the rubble toward Lucius by rapidly consuming his sacrificial credits. The sound of wood crackling like a campfire filled the air, and Ashlock saw Titus's blackwood hand begin to glow like lit coals. A mere second later, Titus's hand exploded, and the now handless Titan's arm flew back from the force as a ball of light expanded out rapidly and lit up the evening sky. Blast him now, Ashlock shouted to Zeus, and the marble statue brought down his finger like a Roman emperor executing someone at the Colosseum. The darkened storm system spread across the sky until the horizon lit up as the most violent lightning bolt Ashlock had ever witnessed lashed out and stuck Lucius in the back, knocking the man to his knees. Don't give him a second to recover. Ashlock sent all 8 of his vines that were wielding swords at Lucius and even utilized his spatial chi to compress the distance, making his sword seem like nothing but a blur as they skewered Lucius. Lucius let out a gargled scream as his body tried to heal, but Ashlock kept the swords firmly in place and even pushed them deeper. Yet even with all this, the man simply refused to die. With the sun yet to set below the distant mountains, Lucius could pull on a limitless source of chi to remain alive. The problem was Ashlock needed to kill Lucius before the sunset, as the moment that sun vanished, his progeny Dominion skill would cancel out, and his fractured soul would return to his main body. He would then feel sleepy as Lucius wasn't the only one who relied on sunlight for power. Lucius yelled out as he stood and tried to pull the swords out one by one. But vines erupted from the ground and coiled around his arms, legs, chest, and neck. Honestly, the fact he was still alive was a testament to Lightki's overwhelming healing capabilities. The sound of muffled screams and breaking bones came from Lucius as the vines tightened, and Titus brought down his remaining hand. However, this time, instead of trying to squash the puny human, Titus formed a cage out of his fingers that blocked the sunlight. Spatial chi swirled around within the cage and compressed the space, increasing the cage's gravity 100-fold, forcing Lucius's forehead to kiss the stone. Ashlock felt the blinding light within Lucius's consciousness begin to dim, allowing him to further invade his mind. You brought this upon yourself, Ashlock said, letting his rage engulf the man's mind. A storm of pure chaos and wrath manifested around the blinding light, suffocating it like a forewarning for this fool's inevitable death. Just humor me one question, the light of Lucius' consciousness asked Ashlock, who is truly behind the Ashlock Trading Company. You're looking at him. Lucius raised his head from the stone and locked eyes with the tree blazing with lilac flames directly in front of him. Ridiculous, Lucius muttered as his body, skewered by 8 swords and half crushed to death, began to break apart and dim. You claim I will depart from this world not at the tip of an immortal sword or in the mouth of a great beast but to a spirit tree of all things. I can't accept it. Who said I would let you depart from this world? Ashlock's haunted laughter filled Lucius's mind. The afterlife is too good for the likes of you. Instead, you will serve me for eternity in a new body of my design like these other ints to repay what you have done. Lucius's eyes widened. These cursed creatures of wood were once your enemies. Ashlock could feel the fear festering in his mind. The light of his soul began to glow as he regained his will to resist and tried to struggle against the many restraints keeping him down, but it was useless. The void lake was now within strike range. Lucius, this is goodbye. For now, Ashlock said calmly as he mentally ordered hundreds of tendrils to shoot out of the void lake and carry out his execution. No, wait. Lucius cried out as the void lake surrounding his cage lurched at him. I just want to see the sunset one last time. The headless body slumped forward but was kept partially propped up by the 8 swords and vines still wrapped around his limbs. Lucius was dead cold and would never see another sunset. Ashlock created a portal to Red Vine Peak under Lucius's corpse and unceremoniously dropped him through. He needed to turn Lucius into an ant before nightfall to save Diana and heal everyone else injured during this fight, but he wasn't foolish enough to rush the process. If creating chaos had taught him anything, creating a high-ranking ant without enough chi stored up was a recipe for disaster. Thankfully, Ashlock had a freshly butchered spatial cultivator to consume and a forest of soul fire offspring to call upon. Using a mixture of telekinesis and his vines to gather Hammond's remains, he dumped them through a portal beside his main body as the sun fell behind the distant mountain range. The moment dusk turned to night, Ashlock felt an intense pull on his fractured soul, ripping it from his progeny and returning it to his body. With sleepiness beginning to rear its ugly head, he wasted no time devouring Hammond's remains. Plus 1,870. After just minutes, Hammond's delicious corpse had been consumed, and Ashlock felt an ungodly rush of power throughout his entire trunk and roots as his star core expanded in size, and he went up a stage. System. Ashlock shouted. Demonic Demi-Divine Tree, Age 9. Star Core, 5th Stage. Soul Type, Amethyst, Spatial. He was now in the 5th stage of the Star Core realm, and had 2,694 sacrificial credits to spend. But more importantly, his Star Core was filled to the brim with chi, meaning now was the perfect time to turn Lucius into an ant. Chapter 186, Soul. Ashlock's Star Core pulsed with power as he directed all the ambient spatial chi on the mountain peak to create a bubble around Lucius's corpse. That's not going to be enough, Ashlock muttered as he looked around for a solution. His gaze eventually landed on a badly beaten spider with 2 broken legs dragging on the ground, and one of his eyes was missing crawling through a portal he had left open to the White Stone Palace. Larry, sorry to trouble you, but could you engulf this corpse in your ash? Ashlock had noticed that one of the greatest strengths of Larry's ash was its ability to nullify other affinities, which made it the perfect affinity type to contain the inevitable wave of death chi that would be emitted during the creation of an ant, as nobody on the peak was in any condition to protect themselves with soul fire. Certainly, Master, Larry said gruffly as he slowly crawled over and vomited ash into the spatial bubble. Ashlock upped the gravity within the bubble, causing the ash to swirl around the corpse like a dense snow globe. The portal snapped closed behind Larry, leaving Sebastian and Jeb behind as the former wasn't too injured, and Ashlock didn't want him to see his main body. Meanwhile, the latter was pummeled 10 feet under and was most certainly dead, having taken the full brunt of a punch from a peak Star Core cultivator while wielding the power of a god. Jeb's demise was unfortunate, but if not for his sacrifice, Lucius would have landed his light beam attack and obliterated the tree that contained part of Ashlock's soul, which would have lost them the fight and given Ashlock permanent soul damage. Not to mention Stella would have been killed seconds later. Sadly, Ashlock didn't have time to mourn the loss of one of his ints right now as he glanced around the mountain peak. Elder Margaret, Zeus, and Titus were missing limbs. Diana was lying in a glowing ink array, half dead, and Stella was passed out cold on the bench and clearly in terrible pain from the burns that covered her entire body if her scrunched-up face was anything to go by. "Okay, here goes nothing," Ashlock said as he activated his SS-grade skill Necroflora Sovereign. A black root emerged from the ground and entered the snow globe of swirling ash and spatial chi that Ashlock had created. As the black root entered Lucius's body to deposit the seed, Ashlock mentally depicted what type of end he wanted and prayed to the heavens that he had enough chi. His name will be Soul, an eternal worshipper of the sun. His light will shine on all who bear witness as he simultaneously heals, protects, and obliterates foes. Upon his final thought, while picturing a devoted worshipper praying to the sun, he felt an immense tug on his star core that blazed like a god's furnace within his trunk. As if the plug had been pulled, his star core dimmed within his body as chi poured through the root and into the seed within Lucius. "No way," Ashlock muttered as he began to grow concerned. Despite his star core being near maximum capacity and having expanded to the 5th stage, he found his reserves depleted within seconds, and the int's creation was still greedily demanding more. This made sense, as he was trying to create a new being in his image that was many stages above his cultivation realm, but that didn't mean it wasn't worrying. "Sorry, my children, could you lend father a helping hand once more?" Ashlock implored the forest of demonic trees that covered many miles in all directions. The response he felt through the network was less than enthusiastic, which made sense as the sun had dipped below the horizon. He also felt the warm embrace of sleep at the back of his mind, calling him to the land of dreams. Nevertheless, his offspring answered his call for help, and Ashlock watched through his spiritual sight as the entire mountain range lit up and chi of various affinities traveled toward him. Ashlock didn't bother trying to convert all of the chi types into spatial chi and instead directed them all straight into the black root, feeding the seed and letting the skill deal with it. "Why does creating powerful ints always have to be stressful?" Ashlock cursed as his thousands of offspring barely kept the SS-grade skill from sucking him to death. Eventually, after a long 10 minutes, the seed was finally formed. How such a small thing contained all of the chi he had in reserve, plus all of the chi a forest of 1,000 soul fire trees could provide, baffled Ashlock to no end. "Whatever, here we go. Everyone brace yourselves." A wave of death chi exploded out with the snow globe containing the majority, and Ashlock used his presence to suppress the rest so none reached Stella as she slept. However, the sudden column of light blasting through the bubble and piercing the heavens wasn't contained. Ashlock marveled at the beacon of white light that was so bright it illuminated the entire valley and briefly turned the night into day. Ashlock then saw 2 gray-colored arms of wood slowly emerge from within the bubble, the palms aimed upwards as if they were praising the sky, followed by 6 more arms for a total of 8. Then Lucius, who had become Soul, stood up, and half his new tree-like body became exposed. Ashlock dismissed the spatial chi bubble, letting the swirling ash fall to the ground. The column of light brightening the night sky ceased and condensed into a ball of light that looked like a white dwarf that floated where Lucius' head once was before it was deleted from existence by the void chi tendrils. With the blinding light and the ash-filled bubble gone, Soul stood there in silence, and Ashlock could finally get a good look. Soul stood around 3 meters tall and retained a humanoid frame with 2 legs and a regular torso, but that's where the similarities to Lucius's previous form ended, and the differences began. 8 arms jutted out in a perfect circle from Saul's shoulder area, with the palms all facing inward as if they were forming a crown to hold the floating ball of white light that served as Saul's head and bathed the whole mountain peak in warm light. Ashlock felt his weariness briefly subside, and his leaves subconsciously tilted on their stalks toward Soul in a vain attempt to absorb the light. Despite Saul's strange appearance, Ashlock could tell, much like Chaos, who was incredibly chi-intensive to run, Soul was on another level. The chi within Saul's body left over from his creation was literally being burned to keep that floating star for a head lit, and Ashlock didn't have the chi on hand to charge Soul up, so time was of the essence. "Soul, stop being a glorified street lamp and go heal Diana," Ashlock commanded, and the End went to wordlessly fulfill his orders. He understood his tone was a little harsh, but the ints were no different from wooden golems or machines. The ints he created from intelligent beings like humans could understand complicated commands, but that didn't mean they were conscious like a person or animal. They had no thoughts or desires of their own. Despite what Ashlock had told Lucius before he was executed, he was as good as dead. It's just his soul was forcefully mutated and now resided in Saul's body as a power source for as long as it lived. Unlike Jeb, an expendable ent made from a weak cultivator with the very common earth affinity, Ashlock planned to take far greater care of Soul as he was a near-nascent soul ent with a relatively rare light affinity that was great for healing. Talking of healing, Ashlock watched closely as Soul stood before Diana. Kaida hissed at the strange ent as it bent down. The closest of its 8 arms dipped its hand into the floating sun that served as its head and plucked free a wisp of light. Holding the wisp between its fingers, Soul bent his arm downward as if he were a priest at a church giving a blessing and pushed the wisp into Diana's forehead. Kaida slithered back and let off a worried hiss as Diana's body bathed in a glowing white light, with the spot on her forehead as the epicenter. Her flesh began to wiggle around as if worms were under the surface, and her broken feathered wings shuddered and snapped back into place as the crushed bones underneath were formed. A few moments passed, and Ashlock noticed Diana's body begin to revert to her usual human form. The wings retracted into her shoulders, her claws became regular nails, and her body shrunk. She also became less curvy, like a succubus, and returned to her usual self. Diana's eyes snapped open, and she instinctively raised a hand to shield herself from Saul's blinding light. She opened her mouth, likely to scream in confusion, but Kaida slammed into her like an uncoiled spring, knocking her to the side. "Ag, hey." Diana protested as she tried to push away the snake, licking her face and hissing happily, "Ow, stop it. Ah, help. What is going on?" Soul rose to his feet and stood there unmoving like a lamppost, having completed his task. "Now go heal Elder Margaret," Ashlock said impatiently, and Soul moved to comply. Even with Saul's ambient light illuminating the mountain peak and keeping him awake, Ashlock knew Soul would run out of chi very soon, which would plunge the mountain peak into darkness, and he knew sleep would quickly follow. With that in mind, he wanted to ensure everyone with life-threatening injuries was cared for. Then, if Soul had any chi left, he would use his light to keep him awake so he could go after Knox, who was currently being chased down by the Grand Elder with the help of his offspring. "Coming to help me. How kind," Elder Margaret said dryly as she tried to sit up from her resting place against one of the fire affinity trees but winced. "Ow ow ow." The bloody cloths around her missing arm had drawn most of Ashlock's focus before. Still, she had injuries everywhere else alongside severe burns, which was ironic considering she should be somewhat resistant to heat as a fire cultivator. Soul didn't react to Elder Margaret's words as he once again put a hand into the blinding light and conjured up a wisp. Having watched what Soul did with Diana, Elder Margaret pushed herself up with a grunt and received the light wisp on her forehead without making Soul bend down. You wouldn't need to bend down if your arms weren't stuck in an upward position trying to hold the sun up, Ashlock sighed at the ridiculous design flaw of his new ent. Elder Margaret let out a pleasant gasp of surprise as she began to glow, and Ashlock watched in real time as her severe burns disappeared. It was like watching mold grow in reverse as the bright red skin retreated. Then, the light spiraling down her body from the spot on her forehead where Soul had touched reached the stump where her arm used to be. The blood-stained cloths she had tightly wrapped around were pushed off as the stump exploded with wiggling worms of flesh and muscle that all spiraled outward together and twisted like a steel cable to form a brand new arm. Elder Margaret inspected her freshly grown hand, which was so smooth and perfect that it almost looked like it was made from plastic. Gone was her aged hand covered in calluses and scars that showed her past as a warrior of the Redclaw family. "What do you think?" Ashlock asked within her mind. She winced slightly at his presence in her consciousness, but it seemed the healing glow still making its way through her body helped protect her mind from his madness. "It's off-putting for the lack of a better word. It feels and acts like my hand, but my brain refuses to recognize it as mine." Elder Margaret pulled back the half-singed sleeve covering her other arm and compared the two with a frown. "Gosh, when I compare them like this, since when had I let myself get so withered? I never quite had an arm this dainty in my youth, but if I had to guess, it's close to how I looked before my first war." Her thoughts were interrupted by her clutching her rumbling stomach. "Why am I suddenly so hungry?" "Interesting," Ashlock mused. "It would appear regrowing limbs requires nutrients or something that you can't derive from the chi in your soul core. It could also be because I am out of chi." Elder Margaret smiled wryly as she collapsed back against the tree and summoned a black ball to her hand that Ashlock recognized as the skin improvement truffle. "I was hesitant to eat this as I feared I wouldn't recognize myself, but if my entire body looks like my new arm then I will grow used to it." Soul stepped back, having finished providing healing, and Ashlock decided to send him to heal Stella next. She seemed mostly stable, just terribly exhausted and burned from Lucius's radiant blaze attack. The light ent strolled off to fulfill its orders, leaving Elder Margaret to eat the truffle and some other fruits in peace while absorbing the swirling fire chi that came from the demonic trees. Ashlock was curious how drastic the change for Elder Margaret would be after consuming the truffle, but those changes would take time, and he had more pressing matters. Soul, after healing Stella, go and heal Larry, Ashlock said as his vision ascended into the skies above. With Eye of the Tree God, it was a cloudless night, so a beautiful galaxy of stars dominated the sky until the horizon. Ashlock took a brief moment to relish in the view and the cold breeze that rustled his leaves. If only life could always be this peaceful. Ashlock sighed as he shifted his gaze from the endless sky of stars to the scarlet forest below that was bathed in the moonlight. Everything seemed like a typical night until he looked east and saw the forest that the mortals inhabited was ablaze. His vision blurred as he got closer, and within seconds, he could see the Grand Elder standing on his sword with manifested phoenix wings of crimson flame and hurling fireballs at the forest below, where there was the shadow of a woman dashing through the foliage and skillfully dodging the onslaught. It was Knox, and in the short time Ashlock hadn't been looking, she had almost made it to the wall that separated the Blood Lotus sect and the wilderness. Chapter 187, Shadow Empress. In the darkness of night, Knox was all-powerful. To her, the shady forest east of the mountains was the perfect place for her to disappear. What little light streaked down from the moon and stars could hardly penetrate the canopy of the strange mixture of evergreen and demonic trees. As a result, she could use techniques like shadow melding to blend into shadows and become invisible to the naked eye, and shadow walk to practically swim through the darkness at insane speed. Knox's large hood bellowed in the cold night air as she dashed between the foliage with the mountain range to her back. Her peak star core blazed in her chest as she used both techniques to escape, yet a deep frown was on her face. Behind her was a path of destruction. The forest was ablaze and casting an annoying red hue on everything. How is he still following me? Knox cursed under her breath as she glanced over her shoulder and saw a man overhead standing on a sword of blazing crimson flames that seemed to have no issue keeping his gaze fixed on her general location no matter what she did. Knox had repeatedly paused to check her clothes for a tracking artifact but had come up blank. It made no logical sense that a cultivator a few stages below her could track her during the night while she was using shadow melding. It was frankly humiliating. Not only had Knox turned tail and ran when that immense presence appeared on the mountain peak, but now she was being easily hunted down like a dog. Knox noticed a massive gray stone wall up ahead that getting over would expose her position, so she stopped under a cluster of demonic trees to try and work out how the Grand Elder was following her. One strange thing she noted was that the Redclaw Grand Elder seemed to avoid hurling fireballs at the demonic trees for whatever reason, so she used them as cover. Shadow creation, Knox whispered as she closed her eyes and exerted her presence on all the surrounding darkness. As per her mental image, the darkness rose and morphed into fiends that were legless creatures with large mouths and claws. Spread out, Knox commanded, and the fiends silently moved through the darkness in all directions. She then narrowed her eyes through the scarlet canopy at the Grand Elder in the sky to see if he reacted to her creations. To her confusion, the Grand Elder seemed unaware of the fiends or didn't care as he continued moving and looking in her general direction. So he doesn't have a way to track shadow chi. I just don't understand how he is doing this, Knox muttered as she perched on the thickest branch she could find. A small fire wisp drifted past her vision and lazily rose into the night sky. Confused, Knox followed the origin of the fire wisp and noticed that all of the surrounding demonic trees also had tiny wisps of fire forming on their leaves like water droplets and then casually floating up into the sky. Since when did demonic trees have fire chi? Knox wondered to herself. Closing her eyes, Knox retraced her steps with her spiritual sense and noticed a trail of fire wisps floating into the sky from most of the demonic trees she had passed, although some emitted a dense mist instead. So the trees are exposing my location to the Grand Elder. Knox opened her eyes and cursed as she noticed a giant ball of flames heading straight for her. Using Shadow Step, she teleported through the darkness a few trees away and watched as the fireball struck the ground and engulfed the area she had been a moment before in a crimson blaze. Knox may be a few stages above the Grand Elder regarding cultivation, but that firepower was no joke. Having sacrificed her soul shadow earlier to make an escape, her powers were temporarily halved, so taking such an attack to the face wasn't ideal. I thought he was avoiding the demonic trees. Knox squinted at the fire but then noticed the trees seemed unharmed and remembered they had been strange fire-cultivating trees, so they would naturally be resistant. If the demonic trees are exposing me, I just need to get away from them, Knox concluded as she silently leapt down from the tree branch and landed among the dense foliage of the forest floor. Thankfully, she had no need to cleave a path through the thicket as she could simply shadow walk her way to the giant gray wall and escape into the wilderness. There shouldn't be any demonic trees over the wall, Knox assumed as she approached it at high speed. But then her eyes widened as she saw the gray wall begin to progressively lighten up, which could only mean one thing. There was a fireball heading this way. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw the entire sky ablaze as a literal wall of fire descended on her location. Shadow armor, Knox cursed as she dove to the ground and wrapped herself in the surrounding darkness that had become sparse by the sudden light that blanketed the night sky. Seconds later, her surroundings became an inferno as crimson flames obliterated all of the forest near this area of the wall. Knox stood up while full-plate armor made of shadows protected her body. She was now effectively cornered as the surrounding fire suppressed her movement techniques, which meant one thing. It was time to stop running and become the hunter rather than the prey. How bother so? I wanted to conserve my chi for my journey across the wilderness and reform my soul shadow as soon as possible, but this persistent Grand Elder is begging to die. Knox crouched down and thrust her hand into the crimson flames. Let's convert his little fire, shall we? Knox murmured, dark flame manipulation, her voice muffled behind her shadow helmet. Her star core pulsed, channeling shadow chi into the Grand Elder's fire, which promptly darkened. The blackness surged outward, corrupting the nearby crimson flames, and soon, the entire vicinity was engulfed in a sea of black fire. Knox, return that which you have stolen, the Grand Elder's voice thundered from above as he flared his mockery of phoenix wings. A sword, wreathed in dark red flames, pointed at her as if the Grand Elder condemned her to death. Why don't you come down here and take it from me then? Knox mocked as she commanded the sea of black flames to morph into a massive claw that surged up into the night sky like a tsunami hitting a wall. The fiend she had summoned earlier used the rising claw as a bridge to reach the man in the sky. The Grand Elder responded in kind to the approaching attack by conjuring a tornado of flames that emanated from his sword tip and slammed into the rising claw of black flames. Knox smirked behind her helmet. To fight a shadow chi cultivator in the dead of night was simply madness. No matter how much the foolish Grand Elder threw at the black flame claw, Knox could endlessly pull from the surrounding darkness to feed it. What? The Grand Elder seemed to have noticed the situation, as no matter how much chi from his own star core he channeled into his fire tornado, the claw kept rising toward him. This is goodbye, Knox muttered as the shadow claw caught up to the retreating Grand Elder and began to crush him in its grasp. However, to Knox's bafflement, a sudden column of light shot up into the sky, instantly turning the dark night into daytime and exorcising her shadow claw as if it were a ghost. Knox looked at the beam of light in fear. Is that Lucius going supernova? Did that mysterious, overwhelming presence that suddenly appeared really defeat him even while Lucius was pulling on the power of his god? With no intention to wait around and see if she could survive the aftermath of a peak star core realm cultivator going supernova while having his body filled to the brim with light chi, Knox turned to flee but realized a slight issue. There were almost no shadows left in the face of the blinding light, and the now freed Grand Elder seemed hellbent on taking advantage of that as he rocketed down towards her and crash-landed a mere meter away as Knox managed to sidestep the attempts to decapitate her. For your transgressions against the Ashlock Trading Company, the Grand Elder said coldly as he emerged from the smoldering crater while ablaze with crimson flames, I sentence you to death. You don't have the capabilities? Knox half-lied as she absorbed the few shadows in her vicinity to form a sword and shield, which weren't her preferred weapons. This is really bad. I can't get close to slit his throat in one move as his flames remove any nearby shadows, and my powers have been halved due to sacrificing my soul shadow earlier to escape. With the blinding column of light robbing her of the chance of shadow walking away and the Grand Elder's flames making shadow step impractical, Knox had no choice but to kill this pest before she could escape safely. The Grand Elder charged forward, leaving a blaze in his wake, and showed Knox why the Red Clothes had once been hailed as one of the greatest warrior families. She tried to block his double-handed sword swing, but the blade split her shadow shield with raw strength alone and bit deep into her flesh. Gritting her teeth behind her helmet of darkness, Knox used the Grand Elder's unstoppable momentum and allowed herself to be thrown like a rag doll to the ground. By twisting her body as she hit the floor, she freed her arm from the sword and then scrambled up to her feet and broke out into a sprint. Darkness absorption, Knox hissed as she pulled in some nearby shadows while running to heal her wound. Compared to the healing Lucius could achieve, it was pathetic, but in turn, her stealth and attack techniques were stronger. Or they would be stronger if not for me missing half my power and there being no shadows around for me to command, Knox lamented as she dove to the side to dodge a fireball that was hurled her way. The sheer force of the explosion that followed knocked her off balance and threw her back to the floor. How much chi does this bastard have? Knox cursed. It just didn't make sense. They weren't in a volcanic region, so all of this fire he was creating had to come from his internal reserve or from pulling in and converting the ambient chi, but that was very inefficient unless. Her suspicions were proven correct as she got back up and scrutinized the flames surrounding the Grand Elder's body a little closer. Just how pure are his spirit roots? That flame doesn't have a lick of impurities in it. That was even more bad news. The more pure someone's spirit roots, the more efficient their chi usage was. Knox had an above-average spirit root, but her technique's potential power was still dampened slightly by the impurities that got mixed in, so she had to compensate by expending more chi to output the intended level of intensity. Knox then remembered the spirit root improvement pill Rosalind had given her and that she had consumed. It helped improve her spirit root, which should have been impossible, but it had only been by a small amount. I would need to consume 3 more to get a spirit root on the same level as the Redclaw Grand Elder. Fuck, maybe I should have gotten some more pills out of them before going after the earrings. It was a regrettable and missed opportunity, but with poison still swirling around her body, she had no intentions of sticking around and being caught in a trap. Knox was ripped from her wandering thoughts by the Grand Elder barreling into her with his sword once again, accompanied by a superheated blast that devoured her shadow armor and weapons, leaving her defenseless. Crossing her arms to eat the impact and reaching into the folds of her cloak, Knox pulled down on a pendant, and the moment the chain around her neck snapped, a defensive bubble formed that saved her from losing both her arms to the following sword swing. "You merchants and your life-saving artifacts?" the Grand Elder sneered as Knox kicked him away to gain some distance, "just cheap tricks employed by weaklings." The Grand Elder paused as the lights went out, and they were bathed in darkness once more. The column of light depriving Knox of shadows had vanished, and the night had returned instantly. The sky was once again filled with the distant cosmos and large moon, which made Knox grin. "You were saying?" Knox asked as she pulled on all the surrounding shadows to reform her armor and refill her star core. Cultivators were always strongest in a chi-rich environment that complemented their techniques, and Knox had never felt more powerful. She may be weak during the day, or against light and fire cultivators, but she was nothing short of an empress at night as she commanded the shadows to do her bidding. Night beast summoning, Knox spread out her presence, and soon the forest became busy as native wolves of the forest emerged from the thicket with coats of shadow and began to encircle the Redclaw Grand Elder while snarling. Unlike the summoned fiends from earlier, these were real monsters that she was mind-controlling and granting heightened strength with her shadows. So, each one of them could exert a force comparable to herself despite usually being weak. They all leapt at the Grand Elder upon Knox's command, and he struggled to fight them off as the shadows wreathed around their bodies, absorbed the flames, and allowed the wolves to avoid his senses and attack from blind spots. Knox used shadow creation to manifest some throwing knives and threw them at the Grand Elder with the intention of killing, but there was a sudden ripple of spatial chi in the area and a rift formed, swallowing her attack. Shit, Knox turned to flee. Her entire plan had been to run as far away from the powerful spatial cultivator while they were busy dealing with Lucius, who she had left behind. But if the disappearance of the column of light was anything to go by, Lucius was likely dead. The gravity around her began to increase exponentially as the spatial chi rose from the roots of the forest and suffocated the surroundings. Pulling in more shadows to empower herself, Knox pressed on toward the giant gray wall. With her spiritual sense, she attempted to trace the source of the spatial chi, but strangely, all she could pinpoint as the source was the other mountain peak next to the one with the white stone palace on it. What in the 9 realms? Is there a massive spatial chi gathering array built into the mountain, or is there some monarch realm cultivator slumbering inside? Knox had no plans to find out as the world took on a dark hue as she shadow walked through the forest toward the wall. Within a minute, she arrived at it, and instead of going over the top, she smashed straight through. As she found out, the stone was runically engraved on the inside and offered quite the resistance, but she was a 9th stage star core cultivator at the peak of their power, so it yielded. Stepping through the hole in a shower of rock, Knox looked around. Beyond the wall were endless rolling meadows with only the occasional outcroppings of trees here and there. which meant fewer shadows to work with but also no more demonic trees giving away her location. It's still bizarre that they did that. In fact, I couldn't even smell the usual rancid smell of demonic trees due to the acidic soil and the rotting corpses that usually surround them. Knox concluded that absolutely nothing about this small corner of the Blood Lotus sect made any sense at all. I wonder if that strange demonic tree I saw at the White Stone Palace is responsible for all this. The words died in her throat as a portal manifested above her head, and that massive black wooden ent that was still missing most of an arm dropped through, making the entire ground shudder. Knox wasn't having any of this Titan's nonsense, as she knew it utilized spatial chi, so she used shadow creation to create an enormous axe out of shadows and charged at its leg before it could get its bearings. The ent seemed taken aback as it tried to reach down and crush her with its remaining hand, but Knox used Shadow Step to avoid it and easily cut through one of its legs. As the thing began to topple, she cut the other one for good measure. What good is some mid-stage wooden golem going to do? Knox snorted as she watched the black wood titan fall like timber and create a small earthquake. It continued glaring at her with its flaming eyes but was unable to get back up. At least fight me yourself instead of sending your minions. Knox turned to leave but paused as she came face to face with something that made her entire body briefly freeze up. A single indescribable eye floated with the slit of a giant tree and gazed at her with alien curiosity through a rift. Knox felt her body shiver with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had felt this feeling once before, which had drawn her interest in the earrings worn by Stella, but this was on another level compared to the artifact. She just couldn't look away. It was as if the gaze drew her in, wresting her attention away from her brain and body that so desperately wanted to flee. I want it. Raising her hand slowly, Knox tried reaching the eye. I need it. But all she felt was pain. Blinking in confusion, she managed to tear her gaze from the eye and look at the thick, thorn-covered vine coiling around her arm. It had only felt like a moment, but apparently, it had been long enough for vines to emerge from multiple portals and begin to devour her alive. Chapter 188, Gains and Losses. Stella awoke to the night sky and a cold breeze. Her neck felt stiff from the wooden bench's arm she used as a pillow, and her mind felt fuzzy as she let out a long yawn. Sitting up and rubbing the back of her neck, Stella looked down at her body and noticed two things. First, her favorite clothes were ruined with them being singed and torn in places, and secondly, there was a strange white glow wreathing her form, and she could see in real time her severe burns receding as if they were being erased by the glow and replaced with her usual flawless skin. Looking to her side in confusion, Stella faced the source of the strange white glow, and even stranger, and Stella could instantly tell it was one of Ash's abominations by its bizarre, inhuman wooden form that towered over the bench. 7 of its arms seemed to hold up a floating sun of white light. Meanwhile, one was extended out toward her as if asking for a handshake. A light affinity ent. That means. Stella's brain kicked into gear as the memory of her final moments of consciousness came flooding back. She had been engaged in an intense fight with Knox and using the full power of her bloodline that she still didn't fully understand when a sudden wave of superheated ash and light smashed into her, sending her hurtling through a wall and knocking her out cold. Tree, is this thing Lucius? Did we really kill that lunatic? Stella asked aloud as she placed her hand on Ash's trunk that was beside her. However, his attention was elsewhere. What could he be focused on right now? Stella wondered but saw a massive portal suddenly materialize on the mountain peak, and Titus promptly stepped through. Stella leapt up from the bench and peered through the unstable rift, and her heart sunk in her chest as she saw Knox quickly chop Titus down within seconds while wielding a giant two-handed battle axe made from shadows. Digging into her spatial ring, Stella replaced her burnt clothes with baggy drawstring trousers, a shirt, and a black cloak. The sword Ash had gifted her from the Void Mind Elder's belongings appeared in her hand, and she was about to step through the portal to confront Knox again when Ash spoke in her mind. What are you doing? Stella tilted her head. What does it look like I am doing? She lifted her sword and pointed it at Knox through the portal. To confront Knox and get back my earrings, obviously. Are you crazy? How could you even defeat her? Did you not just see how she handled Titus, who was a few stages above you? Stella gripped the handle of her sword tightly as she came up with a refute. I was able to handle her just fine before with my bloodline. Didn't you see me effortlessly matching her attacks at the White Stone Palace? You mean back when Lucius illuminated the room with his light techniques so Knox couldn't unleash her full potential? Ashlock replied dryly. Stella winced as she popped a Mind Fortress pill that helped numb the lingering headache from overusing her bloodline powers and Ash's voice. Look, just trust me, okay? Stella turned to face the giant demonic tree and pleaded, with your assistance and my bloodline powers, we can defeat her and get my earrings back. Just think about how tasty Knox's corpse will be and all the things we can loot from her spatial rings. Ash went silent momentarily, so Stella added, don't forget Knox is also poisoned. I really think I have a chance here. Can you even activate your bloodline on demand? Stella glanced away. Not exactly, but I think it activates when I am in danger. So it should work. Look. If I get out there and my bloodline stays dormant, I will teleport out immediately. I promise. Fine, Ashlock replied, but I will lend you a helping hand. Give me a moment. There was the sound of splintering wood as Ashlock's colossal trunk cracked open, and Stella quickly turned on her heel to face the other way. Yet even with her back turned to Ash, she could still feel the unsettling gaze of his strange eye on her back. Stella looked through the rift that Titus had jumped through, which gave her a bird's eye view of Knox, who was turning to leave but froze. A rift had appeared before her, and even Stella shivered slightly as the demonic eye glared at Knox. Multiple other rifts manifested just above the grass around Knox, and Stella heard the sound of vines exploding from the ground behind her. Then she saw how the vines shot through the rifts, wrapped around the enthralled Knox, and began to melt her shadow armor. Vines holding swords also went through, but tendrils of shadow lashed out from Knox's armor and slapped them away. I can't seem to stab her due to the armor, Ash's voice, which sounded like 1,000 cries overlapping, echoed in her mind, so I need you to kill Knox while she is still stunned. I will try and wear down the armor with the vines to give you an opening. Stella stepped through the rift and felt her confidence die in her chest as she dropped down and landed on the grass beside Knox. Despite being distracted and held down by Ash's vines, the sheer presence the woman commanded over her surroundings was incomparable to before Stella was knocked out by Lucius. It was literally like comparing night and day. There was this awful feeling as if all the shadows lurking nearby were eyeing her up like a pack of hungry wolves and would devour her at a simple order from their mistress. It was comparable to standing on a small raft adrift out at sea and seeing nothing but monster-infested waters in all directions until the horizon. Stella gulped as she tightened her grip on the sword and went for a two-handed swing, aiming for Knox's neck. The hit landed true, but the armor of shifting darkness that shrouded Knox's body ate the attack like it was nothing. Knox didn't even lose her footing or show any signs of noticing Stella's attack. The woman's attention was entirely on Ash's eye. Through the rift. The difference from before can't be this extreme. Stella couldn't believe it. As if to test if this was real life, she pulled back the sword again to strike, this time with all the strength she could muster, but the result was the same. Even with the blade coated in her lilac flames, the shadow armor simply ate her attack and then mended itself by pulling in the nearby shadows. Come on, bloodline, do something. Stella gritted her teeth as she saw Knox raise her hand toward the eye and seemingly break from her trance. Knox then looked down at the vines coiling around her body and effortlessly reached down and ripped them apart. Now free from Ashlock's vines, Knox turned slowly and faced Stella. The two engaged in a staring contest for a moment, although Stella could not see Knox's expression as it was obscured by the helmet of shadows. Knox tilted her head and seemed to scrutinize her. The look in your eyes isn't the same, Knox said in a muffled voice. Instead of focus and tranquility, all I see is fear and indecisiveness. A scared child that shouldn't be here. Stella barely raised her sword in time to meet Knox's blade as she reappeared right before her. Your strength is lacking. Knox pushed Stella back, causing her to stumble. Stella quickly regained her footing and prepared to defend against another attack, but Knox had again vanished into the shadows. Stella's breathing was erratic as her eyes darted around the dark meadow. All she could hear in the stifling silence was the blood rushing around her ears and the distant howls of wolves that seemed to be hunting something past the wall. Every little sound or shifting shadow drew her focus as she turned in circles. If only my stupid bloodline would activate, I could quickly react to any attack. Stella cursed as she desperately tried to activate it on command, but nothing happened. In fact, a better way to put it was she had no idea how to activate her bloodline in the first place. In the past, it just sort of activated on its own, and she let it happen. Tell me, Stella, what happened to Lucius? Knox's voice tickled her ear, making her heart almost leap out her chest as she spun round to nothing but the nightly wind that swayed the lush grass of an endless meadow bathed in starlight. Stop lurking in the shadows and come fight me, Stella shouted into the night, trying to stop her voice from shaking. With no response from Knox, Stella closed her eyes and entered the spatial plane, which turned her surrounding reality into clearly defined grids and purged all illusions. Glancing around, she soon found Knox lurking a distance away below the surface within a shadow. It was as if there was an underground reality that she could easily move through so long as there were shadows. Stella, you promised you would teleport away if your bloodline didn't activate, Ashlock whispered in her mind. All of my ints are out of chi, and Larry is currently being healed, so you are on your own against a far superior foe. She is practically toying with you. Leave now as you promised. I just need her to pressure me so my bloodline activates. Stella mentally replied to Ash, create a portal nearby, and I will pretend to be trying to escape through it. That should draw her out, Stella suggested as she kept checking her surroundings. Ashlock complied with her request, and a rift rippled into existence a few meters to her left. Almost immediately, Knox began surging toward her like a predator through the shadows, and due to the spatial plane, Stella could fend off the attack in time. The clang of their swords echoed through the land, and the flying sparks illuminated Stella's determined and frustrated face. Knox pulled back and then ruthlessly continued the assault. Stella tried her best to match the attack pattern as she had before, and if not for the phantom muscle memory from their earlier fight, she would have lost within 3 hits. Your technique is an amateurish replica of mine, full of openings, Knox sneered behind her helmet of shadows. I thought I had come across someone from the same teacher as I, but you are nothing but a fraud. A confused child waving around a sword. Stella felt her breath leave her lungs as a chi-empowered kick from Knox found its way into her stomach, sending her flying back. There was a ripple of spatial chi as a rift opened up right behind her, and Stella felt her ears pop as the air pressure changed, and she tumbled a few meters. Gasping violently as she tried to regain air in her lungs, Stella found herself on Red Vine Peak, staring at Knox through a rift. The woman of shadows returned the gaze from behind her helmet and began to walk toward Stella, but all the rifts still open on the mountain peak snapped closed all at once. No. Stella croaked as she collapsed onto her back in intense pain. That one kick had broken many bones and crushed her organs. If not for Ash creating a portal for her at the last second to take her out of the fight, she might have lost her head. As Stella stared at the cosmos that filled the night sky, wheezing and groaning from the agony, her vision became consumed by a blinding white light. A wooden hand pressed her forehead, making all the pain disappear. The blinding white light then began to dim like a dying star, and moments later, it completely snuffed out, engulfing the mountain peak in darkness. The int's many arms collapsed downward with the palms facing outward, and it stood there motionlessly like a small tree. With a vacant expression, Stella sat back up and stared at where Knox had been through the rift. Why hadn't my bloodline activated? I felt very much in danger and threatened. Is that not how my bloodline works? Or was it because I already used it earlier today? That idea didn't hold up under scrutiny as the headache from earlier had mostly gone away thanks to the light int's healing, so what would be holding her back from using it again? Why am I so pathetic without my bloodline? Stella muttered defeatedly, reaching up and feeling her empty earlobes. Having the earrings she had worn since childhood ripped right from her ears in a meeting she was running by another spatial cultivator was humiliating. If only I was stronger, I wouldn't have lost everything. What's this then? Ash said in her mind, and she felt something nudge her cheek. Confused, Stella looked to the side to see a single red maple leaf earring floating in the air. I would argue they lost far more than we did. Sure, Knox might have escaped with a few of our pills and one of your earrings, but we gained so much more. Like sold the end here or me going up a stage in cultivation from eating Hammond's corpse. Stella's eyes widened as she reached up and plucked the earring from the air. It was real. How did you get this? She blurted out, only half listening to what Ashlock had to say. Nabbed it during the initial fight before I got locked out by that weird bubble, Ash explained. Sadly, I couldn't grab the other one before Knox got her grubby hands on it, but it's going to be fine. She is poisoned, thanks to your foresight. So assuming the pill works, she either returns here begging for a cure, or we just need to be on the lookout for a demonic tree somewhere out there. Stella chuckled at the funny thought of Knox turning into a tree as she fiddled with her earlobe to reattach her earring. After a brief struggle, she got it in, and to her surprise, she felt what could only be described as a pull. Compelled to stand up, she followed the pull, and it led her to the mountain peak edge, where a wall of mist swirled around, forming a sort of wall to maintain privacy. Stella poked her head through the mist, looked out at the rolling meadows, and noted that if she squinted at the wall in the distance, there was the hole Knox had made to get through right in front of her. "What are you doing?" Ashlock asked sluggishly in her mind as if he were half yawning. It seemed sleep was about to claim his consciousness as it did every night. "I felt a pull on my body after putting on the earring, and when I followed it, I was led here." Stella tapped her chin. "That's the way Knox fled, right? Is the earring trying to lead me to the other one?" "Honestly, I have no idea if that's a feature of the earrings," Ashlock admitted with another yawn. "Let's talk about this tomorrow. I'm about to fall asleep." "So, we are just going to let her escape then?" Stella pursed her lips. "With this earring, I can track her down. We could kill her at sunrise." "Stella, I am only powerful within my realm of influence," Ashlock yawned. "By sunrise, she should be well out of my roots range, and at that point, all I can do is send one of you lot after her." "So. And that's exactly the problem. You're all too weak." Ash grumbled. "We already threw everything we had at the merchants while within my realm of influence, and Knox still got away. You saw how she chopped Titus down like he was nothing but a glorified tree. But, what about Zeus or Chaos? Heck, we even have Soul now. That should be enough, right?" Stella was itching to get back out there and fight. "Stella, stop. You are getting overconfident and wanting to risk everything for half of an artifact. Let her come to us, or we can always track down the earrings in the future when we are stronger." Ashlock lectured sluggishly. "See you in the morning, and stay put." "Fine," Stella grumbled as she trudged over to the wooden bench under Ashlock's canopy and then paused when she noticed two pairs of hands lying on the floor in dried blood. Bending down, she picked them up, and if the many silver spatial rings on their hands weren't a dead giveaway, she recognized them both as hands belonging to Hammond and Lucius. A small smile appeared on Stella's face. "I'm surprised you remembered to not eat the spatial rings. Oh, you're asleep." Shrugging, she sat down, pulled all the rings free from their fingers, and then chuckled when Larry and Kaita came over, clearly looking for late-night snacks. "Glad to see you two are okay," Stella sighed as Kaita swallowed one of the hands whole. Larry finished his meal as well and then crawled off. "Where are you going?" Stella asked. "To hunt some wolves that have forgotten who is king around here," Larry replied as he vanished into the mist. Chapter 189, Interlude, Twisted Perfection. Dante Voidmind stared in the mirror and despised what glared back. His once perfect visage was gone and replaced with what could only be described as a beaten-down cripple. His messy black hair, which he used to keep slicked back to draw focus to his perfect jawline, now fell freely over his face like a curtain in a vain attempt to obscure his deformity from prying eyes. "I can fix this," Dante whispered as he raised his trembling hand and ran his fingers down the half of his face corrupted by the void. It was cold and unfeeling to the touch and was a constant reminder of his failure at the Darklight City Alchemy Tournament. Although it had been over a week ago, the same scene of Demetrios Skyrend looming over him and sentencing him to death repeatedly replayed in his mind and made him shiver. He may have escaped that encounter with his life, but in a way, he wished he was dead. "Look at me, Dante." A soothing voice called out from across the dark candle-lit room. "Stop looking in that mirror and chat to me instead." Dante tore his eyes away from the monstrosity in the mirror and hissed through gritted teeth at the woman who was the epitome of beauty laying casually on his bed. "How can I not despise my reflection, mother? Demetrios Skyrend has turned me into a monster. Can you not see what he has done to your beloved son's face?" His mother stared at him with an annoyed look. "Son, it's only you who is so obsessed with your face." "Lies," Dante shouted as he hurled the wooden chair before the mirror across the room. His mother didn't even blink as the chair smashed into the far wall. "I know you and the others talk behind my back. How could you not?" Dante used his left arm to pull on the empty right sleeve of his cloak. "How can I even walk around with any dignity when I am missing an arm? I can't even hold a sword anymore. Is there really nothing Father can do to help me get it back?" "You have spoken to him, right?" "Father doesn't want to speak or hear about you," his mother said coldly as she played with her hair. "Your failure has shaken the family's foundation and resulted in Demetrios Skyrend unleashing his rage on Slimer's defensive arrays for a few days. Do you know how much that cost us in void chi and spirit stones?" "TSK." Dante turned to stare back in the mirror. He hated everything about it. He looked beaten and weak. The missing arm meant his years of training with the sword were wasted as he had been right-handed, and his perfect form and balance were totally thrown off. "It's pointless to fret over that which you have lost to the void," his mother said behind him. Nothing in this realm, not even a monarch realm cultivator, could bring back that which you sacrificed to the void to survive Demetrios Skyren's wrath. This is your life now. This is your reality. You can stand there and stare at your new self with disgust, or move on and own it. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Dante reeled back his fist and planted it into the mirror, shattering the glass and making his hideous form impossible to decipher through the fractures. I refuse to accept this hideous form of me. In fact, I don't even deserve to look at myself anymore. There was a long silence as Dante got his breathing under control. Will father really not speak of me? Dante asked as he dropped his hand and turned to his mother, who stood up from his bed and walked over. His mother side-eyed the shattered mirror and sighed. Dante, you must realize that not everyone speaks of you constantly. You are far too self-absorbed. His mother reached up and brushed his void-corrupted face with the back of her hand. Will some speak ill of you behind closed doors? Yes. But they did that before and will continue to do so no matter how many victories or failures you endure. So perhaps you could use your newfound look to finally wake up from your delusions. Dante could see the pain in his mother's eyes as they looked deeply into his, but he didn't understand. What delusions? Self-absorbed. If not for my failure and changed looks, those branch families would only sing praises about me behind closed doors, as what else could there possibly be to criticize about me? I had been perfect before, the most outstanding prodigy of the Void Mind family. But now, not even my father will mention my great name and my mother is treating me like a deluded child. I understand, mother, Dante replied dismissively, pushing her hand away from his cheek. I will try to do better in the future. Good. Now, if the corruption is bothering you so much, I had this custom made specially for you by the best artifact smith I could find. Her spatial ring flashed with power, and a silver half-mask appeared in her hand. It's made entirely from high-grade spirit stones and is runically enhanced to boost your void chi regeneration. So she does find me hideous. I knew those were all poisoned lies to break me down to her level. Dante took the gift with brewing resentment in his heart. He then pushed his long black hair that covered his face out of the way and fastened the silver mask that only covered the corrupted side and left his intact side exposed. He then turned to look in the mirror but cursed when nothing but a shattered reflection looked back at him. Noah, his mother tutted as she gripped his chin and forced his face to face hers. No looking in mirrors, remember. How you look externally to others isn't all that matters. Easy for you to say. Dante lamented as he stared into his mother's enchanting eyes and felt jealous of her perfect face. Now that he thought about it, didn't his sister have a glow-up recently out of nowhere? If I could get my hands on one of those perfect pebbles she used to break her curse, could it cure me of this void corruption and return me to my previous perfect form? But if it makes you feel better, this mask makes you look handsome and capable. His mother said with a sigh as she likely noticed his wavering focus back to the mirror. What about my missing arm, though? Do you have some silver prosthetic arm for me? Dante insisted. It's in the works, his mother replied as she reached up and put her hand on his stump under the cloak's cloth. Due to sacrificing your arm to the void, there is now a void-attuned gateway into your body through the stump. I know it's not ideal, but your control over the void will be far greater than before. Just at the sacrifice of your swordsmanship. Dante's eyes widened. This void-attuned gateway you speak of. Does my mask that sits on the corrupted part of my face follow the same principle? His mother nodded as she reached up and ruffled his hair like a darn child. Yes. If we tried to pull void chi through our skin using the artifact like you are, we would also suffer from void corruption. Not ideal since it's permanent and incurable, but since you already have void corruption and there's no changing that, might as well help you get more powerful. Dante licked his lips. He had to admit he liked the sound of becoming more powerful. If I get stronger than even uncle, who came down from the higher realm, those fucking branch families and not even father would be able to look down on me without fear. Dante looked down at his left hand and balled it into a fist. When I walk into a room, I can flatten everyone with my presence so they cannot look up at my hideous face. In my presence, they must remain looking at the floor like the ants they are. Yes. This is perfect, Dante gave his mother a face-splitting smile. Would you say that more void corruption would make me more powerful? His mother hesitantly stepped back and gave him a worried look he despised. I don't know what you mean, she stuttered. That look in your eyes is scaring me, Dante. What are you planning to do? Dante closed the distance and put a hand on his mother's shoulder. He felt her tense up and tried to escape his grasp, Just send me the name of the artifact craftsman. I have an idea. Alright. Fine, his dear mother sighed, pushing his hand off. I will send him by in a moment. She stepped around him and headed for the door. Just wait here, and don't do anything crazy, she shouted over her shoulder before vanishing into the corridor and slamming the door shut behind her. Anything crazy? Dante chuckled as he ran a hand through his messy hair. You don't even know. His laughter grew louder as he strode over to the cracked mirror. He ripped it off the wall, threw it to the floor, and began stamping on it while manically laughing. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, sing or scream. His body had so much rage and excitement that he needed to vent it somewhere. Shattered glass and a thoroughly broken frame were scattered on his floor when he was done and leaning against his dresser while breathing heavily. Young master. Someone hurriedly called through the thick wooden door after a few heavy knocks. Dante eyed the door suspiciously. This wasn't the tone he expected from an artifact smith, and his mother had only left a few minutes ago, so this must be someone else. Is father finally calling for me? Grinning to himself and kicking the broken mirror frame to the side, he approached the door while glass crunched underfoot. Opening the door, Dante was confused to see a servant he had never seen before. Speak, what is it you need from me? The young man seemed to freeze as his gaze was stuck on his stump and slowly went to his face. Eyes down here, Dante grabbed the servant's greasy, curly brown hair and forced the man to look at his feet. Never look at me like that again, understand? He hissed in the man's ear and then roughly withdrew his hand. The shaking servant dared not look up as he spoke to the floor. You have been requested to visit the main hall immediately. Dante repressed his joy as that could only mean his father wished to speak with him. Ahem, he coughed awkwardly into his hand to cool his emotions and regain his stoic look, and what does father require of me? Young master, it's not the Grand Elder who wishes to speak with you. Dante felt his heart sink at the servant's words, and his brows furrowed in confusion. Who else dared to demand his presence in the main hall besides his father? Even his mother would be hesitant to do such a thing. Who wishes to see me then? Dante insisted. Go on, spit it out. A Grand Elder from the disciplinary committee arrived moments ago and came here for. The servant gulped. You're serious. Dante's eyes widened as he felt his heart freeze in his chest. The disciplinary committee was a group of powerful cultivators under direct orders from Patriarch Vincent Nitros and his family. Their job was to keep the top-tier families in line and maintain the stability of the Blood Lotus sect. However, since they were also high-level cultivators, they only moved when something big caught the attention of the Nitros family. The disciplinary committee is here for me. Dante just stared off into space. Where had he gone so wrong? Oh, Grand Elder Valander. I am sorry my son has brought such trouble to cause you to have to travel all the way out here in the middle of the night to my humble city. Dante heard his father's voice echo down the grand hallway of the Slimer estate as he approached the main hall, whose hefty ornate wooden doors were left ajar with 2 guards posted outside. No need for such pleasantries, Grand Elder Voidmind. But yes, I must say I didn't expect to be back here so soon. A voice Dante assumed belonged to this Grand Elder Valander person, as it didn't match any of the family elders. So soon. When did you last visit these distant lands far from the Nitros capital? Dante heard his father confusedly ask as he stepped into the room and felt everyone's disgusting gazes on him. Only his father and the young-looking man with white flames dancing on his shoulders sitting on a chair didn't spare him a glance as he entered, which somehow aggravated him even more. I visited a place near here around 4 years ago, Grand Elder Valander explained with a distant expression. I had to visit an old friend's daughter who was alone on one of the mountain peaks near Darklight City. Poor thing. How could the daughter of a noble family end up on a mountain peak alone? Grand Elder Voidmind asked, ignoring Dante's presence as he awkwardly stood there. Grand Elder Valander waved him off. It's a long story, so I won't bore you with too many details. But basically, her parents died protecting the Patriarch, so the Ravenborn family was eating up her land. However, because of her parents' sacrifice, a deal was struck that so long as she passed the Grand Elder exam a year from now. Good heavens, how time flies, excuse me. We got sidetracked. Dante then tensed up as the man who didn't look older than 25 yet possessed the same presence as his father turned to look at him. Now, young man. You have caused quite the headache for us. Now that he is here, may we know the reason for your visit? Grand Elder Voidmind asked respectfully. If anything, we would like to file a complaint against the Skyrend family for attacking us unfairly. Interesting, because that's not what I have been told, Grand Elder Valander said as he stood from his seat and summoned a black scroll. On the back side was a red lotus, the symbol of the Nitros family. Grand Elder Valander cleared his throat and read the scroll's contents. As per the old laws made between the founding families of the Blood Lotus sect, a war between the top families that foster rare chi affinities is forbidden. However, the need for a war may arise. Therefore, in these unfortunate circumstances, a few conditions must be fulfilled for a war to be approved by the Patriarch. First, there must be a just reason for the war provided and approved by the disciplinary committee. Second, the accused party will be given up to 3 months to refute or negotiate the accusations. Once this 3-month period is over, the war can begin. However, it will be stopped if the instigator of the war surrenders themselves to the offended party. Third and finally, the winning family must donate half of the acquired land and resources to the Nitros family. Grand Elder Valander closed the scroll and stowed it away. Dante gulped. I don't see how I am involved here. According to the report submitted by Demetrios Skyrend a week ago, you were listed as the main contributor to the death of 2 scions of House Skyrend, Cassandra and Theron. Nonsense, Dante snapped back. I watched from afar as they were both killed by a powerful void cultivator. He suddenly choked as he felt his throat being squeezed. Do not speak unless spoken to, scion. Grand Elder Valander said coldly. Do I make myself clear? Dante nodded as best he could without his neck snapping from the pressure and fell to his knees, gasping as he felt the invisible hand around his neck disappear. I will admit we reviewed their claims and found them lacking in weight to start a full-on war, Grand Elder Valander smiled. But it wasn't a kind one. However, just a few hours ago, we received a report of mass destruction and death to the Skyrend family, caused by a surprise attack from a Void Affinity beast on Thunderhold Peak. You must agree that 2 attacks involving the Void element and the death of only Skyrend family members in the same week is highly suspicious. A Void beast. A person shouted, and everyone turned confusedly to a woman with long green hair chained to a chair. This is? Grand Elder Valander asked. Eleanor Evergreen, a raging lunatic from a lower family that came here a while ago. Grand Elder Voidmind sighed. You can't ignore her. I'm not insane. Eleanor screamed. You are talking about a demon with a claw the size of a hallway, right? I saw it months ago. It crushed and killed the Winter Wrath Grand Elder before my very eyes. I tried to report it to the Nitros family, but I was laughed at. Interesting. But that's not why I am here. Grand Elder Valander turned back to face Dante. I came here for one reason. The disciplinary committee has agreed to the Skyrend family's accusations and request for war, and they listed Dante Voidmind as this war's primary instigator. No. Wait. This must be some kind of mistake, Dante blurted out. You have 3 months. Refute their claims successfully, or turn yourself into the Skyrend family, and the war can be prevented, Grand Elder Valander said calmly. I will now leave so you may discuss this with the elders of your family. Grand Elder Valander casually ripped apart space and vanished. Otter. Dante threw himself to the floor and pleaded. Just give me a chance. I can fix this. His father raised 3 fingers. You have been a great disappointment and led to great losses for our family. But in honor of the blood running through your veins and my deep love for your mother, I will give you 3 months, Dante. On the day before these 3 months are over, I will drag you to the Skyrend's front gate myself to prevent this war. Do I make myself clear? Dante couldn't believe how cold his father had become after a single failure and strangely felt something within his heart break. Yes, father. I understand. I will not let you down again. His father didn't even react to his declaration and stood up to leave the main hall alongside all the other elders, leaving Dante on his knees alone in the empty hall. Rising to his feet, Dante looked at the now empty chair his dear father had occupied moments ago with a determined look and clenched his lone hand. If he had only 3 months, he either had to get so strong his father couldn't use him as a sacrifice to prevent the war or successfully refute all their claims. Why not both? Dante grinned as he turned to leave. He had an appointment with an artifact smith courtesy of his mother, some flesh to feed to the void and a beast to catch. Chapter 190, Expensive Repairs. Ashlock woke up to clear blue skies, the rising sun, and the chirps of birds. Idolatry daily sign-in system. Day, 3542. Daily credit, 15. Sacrifice credit, 2694. Sign in. It took a moment for his brain to kick into gear, but when it did, Ashlock dismissed the system message floating in his vision and activated Eye of the Tree God, picking the direction Knox had escaped into the wilderness. The lush meadows blurred below him as he traveled to the edge of his route's range and glanced around. Nothing but rolling hills, some weak monsters devouring a line of corpses and trees for miles. Spreading out his spiritual sense, he sighed as he came up empty. Knox was long gone and had left a trail of death in her wake. I wouldn't have been able to stop her with anything in my arsenal even if I managed to stay awake through the night, but it's still frustrating she got away. Ashlock grumbled as he opened rifts above the corpses, which caused the weak monsters to flee in fear. Thorn-covered vines descended on the many half-eaten carcasses and brought them back to his body to be devoured for credits or fed to his summons. Returning to Red Vine Peak, he knew there was a long day ahead of him. The battle with Knox and the merchants had been an eye-opener. I knew the merchants were strong in cultivation level alone, but I didn't expect them to be that capable in combat, but I suppose it makes sense. They traversed the monster-infested wilderness and delve into rifts for a living. After all, Ashlock mused, I guess I let my guard down because I managed to kill a few cultivators near the peak of the Star Core realm in the past, like the Void Mind Elder, but that had been with cheap tricks. I don't think the Void Mind Elder was that well versed in combat. He was a researcher who likely believed he was one of the strongest in the area, so it made sense that he was careless, unlike the merchants, who, despite being stronger than anyone here, were hyper-alert during the entire meeting and acted as a unit without even communicating. Ashlock looked around the mountain peak. Stella was lazily relaxing below him on the bench in the morning sunlight. Diana was asleep or cultivating against a water affinity tree with Kaida wrapped around her like a blanket. Elder Margaret was missing, but Ashlock knew she had been healed and should be alive and well. Actually, talking of the Redclaws, how was the Grand Elder doing? The last I saw of him, he was fighting off a horde of shadow wolves in the forest. I remember sending Larry to go help him before falling asleep. Ashlock left everyone to sleep a little longer on the mountain peak and searched for Larry. It didn't take long before he sensed 3 powerful presences in the eastern forest near the wall. Why are there 3? Ashlock wondered as he looked closer and saw Larry munching on the corpse of a large wolf while the Grand Elder, who was badly scratched up, was resting on the ground while downing healing pills. The third presence was, surprisingly, Elder Mo, who handed the Grand Elder a wooderskin. Never thought the day when our Grand Elder lost to a pack of wolves would come. Elder Mo wiped away a fake tear and sniffled, oh, how far the Redclaws have fallen. Stop being a dramatic old man. The Grand Elder rolled his eyes. They may be normal wolves now, but each exhibited the strength of a peak Star Core realm beast. Not even I and the Guardian Beast here working together could take down the Savage Pack, and it wasn't until dawn arrived that we could finally prevail. Elder Mo raised a brow, really? Could these common forest wolves really display such power? As if in disbelief, he poked the nearest one with the tip of his sword. You're not pulling my leg. Elder Mo, shut up. The Grand Elder grunted as he stood up and handed the wooderskin back. How did you not notice the massive battle we had yesterday? Half of the White Stone Palace is even destroyed. You're serious? Elder Mo scratched his balding head. I just came out here for my morning walk to clear my head after an intense night of wielding spirit fire and then found you looking all beaten up and sorry for yourself, so I came over to poke some fun. Grand Elder Redclaw placed a firm hand on Elder Mo's shoulder. Come with me. Now, he said as he summoned a large sword. Elder Mo reluctantly followed the Grand Elder's lead and got on the floating sword. Ashlock watched as the two flew off toward the White Stone Palace in a trail of blazing flames, leaving Larry to happily munch on the pile of wolf corpses. Ashlock saw no need to take those wolf corpses away to consume as he could feel the low amount of chi in their bodies, so they were hardly worth any credits. I wonder why Larry is even bothering to eat them. Is he just hungry? Ashlock wondered as he returned to Red Vine Peak. Morning tree, Stella said the moment his attention returned to the peak, and she jumped up from the bench. Good morning, Stella, Ashlock replied with abyssal whispers. How are you feeling today? Any lingering pain or headaches? I can get Soul to heal you again if needed. I'm fine, Stella waved him off. Just a lot to think about, you know. Yesterday did not go how I expected at all, and I suddenly feel both weaker and stronger than before. Oh. How do you feel both weaker and stronger? Ashlock asked. Stella summoned her sword and swung it around with surprisingly good form and footwork as if she were fighting an enemy only she could see. When my bloodline activated and I fought on par with Knox by reacting and mirroring her swordsmanship, I felt calm and totally in control, Stella explained as she spun around and her sword cleaved through the air with a whistling sound. Her long hair fluttered in the breeze, and she smiled. Sure, I might have been unable to actually pressure her into defeat as I was constantly on the defensive, but in that short moment, I felt invincible. I see. And then what happened? Stella stopped twirling and cutting the air, and her mood instantly soured. Well, I got knocked out cold by a single attack from Lucius. Woke up and tried to fight Knox again to chase that same high, and instead of having another good fight, I couldn't even leave a scratch on her and got my organs scrambled from a single kick. Stella awkwardly scratched the back of her neck as her sword hung lazily in her hand. I really thought that if my bloodline activated again, I could fight her just like before. Yet, after some self-reflection, I realized I was like an ant to Knox. The moment the sun dipped below the horizon, and she got away from Lucius's light, she basically became a god to us, Ashlock agreed. Although you do have to remember she is 8 stages in the star core realm above you, Stella. You will be as strong as her one day. Stella nodded slowly but then sighed. Even so, the fact her shadow armor stopped my sword like it was nothing is a moment I will struggle to forget. She was right there, a meter in front of me, yet an invisible chasm of power separated us that's so hard to see until it's too late. If not for you saving me with that portal, I definitely would have died last night. I'm glad you came to that realization. So what now? Ashlock asked. Well. Stella tapped her chin as she looked around. How long till the mystic realm opens up? Ashlock brought up his sign-in system and did some quick maths. Around 10 days from now. I see. Stella hummed to herself as she looked at her reflection in her polished sword, not really in the mood to sit down and barely progress in my cultivation. I would rather find other ways to get stronger, like practicing swordsmanship or perhaps even upgrading my sword. Upgrading. Isn't that sword already top quality? I gave it to you from the Void Mind Elder stash. Yeah, but when I needed it to cut, it didn't, Stella pouted. Your swords also couldn't get through Knox's shadow armor and you are in the middle of the star core realm. Surely, we can get better swords somehow. Stella then seemed to remember something. Oh, actually. Didn't Elder Mo get the inheritance of some immortal smith or something? Couldn't I ask him? I think he is still learning. You must remember he only gained the power of Spirit Fire like a month ago. Ashlock chuckled, but I did just see Elder Mo get dragged to the White Stone Palace by the Grand Elder a moment ago, so you could go speak to him over there. Okay, I will go over there then. Unless you need me for anything here. Stella asked, depositing her sword back into her spatial ring and looking around while rocking on her heels. No, I should be good for a while. I am planning to see if there's a way to heal my ints. Ashlock replied and refrained from mentioning his system and wanting to spend his many credits. Alrighty, see you later then. Stella ran forward, and a portal snapped into existence. Ashlock watched as she zoomed across the mountain range through the demonic tree forest, making a mile-apart portals each time. With her gone, Ashlock decided to check on his ints. Chaos and Zeus were standing motionlessly near his trunk. A decent chunk of Chaos's torso was missing, as if a laser beam had blasted through it. Meanwhile, Zeus was missing an entire arm, a part of his chest, and half of his head. So they are healing naturally, just incredibly slowly. Is it because there isn't any void or lightning chi in the area? Ashlock mused as he tried to get a black root to emerge from the ground and link both of them up to him. If I provide some of my chi, maybe they will heal faster. The link worked, but it felt wrong. Unlike usual, where the ints would try to greedily suck him dry of chi as fast as possible, it felt like blowing air into a crumpled plastic water bottle this time. It was still possible, but clearly not ideal. System, how can I heal Chaos and Zeus faster? Ashlock asked and was somewhat surprised when 2 system notifications floated above them in his vision. Chaos has sustained 27% damage. Repair instantly for 324 SC. Zeus has sustained 43% damage. Repair instantly for 645 SC. Holy shit, I can heal my ints instantly with sacrificial credits. System, why didn't you tell me this before? Ashlock cursed. If only he had known about this before, he could have eaten Hammond and then used those credits to repair Chaos to hunt down Knox. Actually, wouldn't this also be a broken feature during the Beast Tide? If I am given an unlimited supply of monsters to consume, I can send out waves of raised ints to fight back against the horde without the risk of losing too many, as I can bring them back to be repaired either at my main body or a progeny. That aside, Ashlock couldn't help but gasp at the prices. Why were they so darn high? Over 600 sacrificial credits. Just to repair Zeus's head and an arm. I could get a new A- grade skill for that much. Ashlock lamented, I supposed Zeus, with his abilities, is an A- grade skill by himself. But I gave up hundreds of sacrificial credits by not eating the corpse I used to make him. Then I slowed down my cultivation progress by powering him up with overpriced chi, and now I have to fork over sacrificial credits to repair him. Why does this feel like owning a sports car back on Earth? Ashlock sighed and stared at the numbers a little longer before losing it again. System, these are ridiculous prices. This is far too expensive. 1,000 credits just to heal 2 ints. That's almost enough for an S-grade system draw. Ashlock grumbled and then remembered that Titus was missing. Using Eye of the Tree God, he went to find Titus and was somewhat surprised to find him still out in the wilderness beyond the wall where the battle between Stella and Knox had occurred. The Titan of Black would lay there motionlessly, but his eyes were still lit like a dying lilac candle flame instead of their usual blazing radiance. System, how much to heal Titus? Ashlock asked, but no system message appeared. Strange. Do I need to link up to Titus to be able to repair him? Now that he thought about it, that made perfect sense. Otherwise, he could have an immortal ent in combat by pouring sacrificial credits into it as it fought. Opening a massive rift in the sky, Ashlock dragged Titus through with a mixture of telekinesis and his thorn-covered vines. Holy shit, this fucker is heavy. Ashlock groaned as he dumped the heap of black wood beside the other 2 ints and snapped the portal closed. The loud noise and rush of wind seemed to wake Diana from her slumber as she let out a loud yawn. After looking around sleepily, she slowly got up and strode over with Kaida lazily snaking beside her. Morning, Patriarch, Diana said while stretching her back. Did we win? I was too busy trying to stabilize the demonic chi in my soul core and body to be able to ask anyone. Diana still didn't know the ancient runic language, so he had no choice but to answer her with abyssal whispers, which immediately made her wince before he even spoke. Some gains and losses. Knox got away, but I raised a new ent called Soul that I used to save your life from Lucius's corpse. Diana swallowed what he assumed was a mind fortress pill and frowned as she gulped it down. Knox getting away is a rather big issue, I must admit. We revealed maybe a bit too much to her, and if we are unlucky, she might force us to reveal the Ashlock Trading Company to the world sooner than we hoped. Indeed, which is why we need to get stronger. Fast. Diana raised a brow and glanced at the rather sad group of ints that looked like a pile of timber. So what are you doing with these? Turning them into firewood. Ashlock chuckled, with how expensive they are to repair. I am debating it. Expensive. What do you need? Spirit stones. Dragon crowns. Wood. Diana listed off in her usual monotone voice, which made her sound like a board secretary having to clean up after their boss's mess for the 10th time today. We should have anything you could possibly need in their spatial rinks. Corpses, Ashlock admitted. I need fresh corpses of powerful monsters. The more corpses I consume, the stronger I become, and the faster I can repair these ints as well. Diana looked at the pile of carcasses Ashlock had retrieved from Knox's warpath through the wilderness. Are these not enough? As I get stronger, I need corpses of higher cultivation to reap the same benefits, Ashlock explained. These corpses aren't bad, but they are all below me. They might give me enough to repair only one of my ints. I see, Diana nodded thoughtfully. Well, Elder Brent should be returning soon with a group of redclaws that went hunting for corpses for you. Anything I can do? Ashlock had actually forgotten about Elder Brent's excursion out into the wilderness among all the craziness that's been occurring recently. Sadly, he doubted their catch would result in all that many credits. Nothing for the moment. Alright, I will just relax and cultivate on the bench then. Diana wandered over and perched herself on the bench under his canopy's shade. Ashlock withdrew his presence from within her mind, which clearly affected her quite a lot, and focused back on Titus, whom he had now connected to with a black root. And to his despair, a system message appeared above the near dead end. Titus has sustained 64% damage. Repair for 960 SC. Ashlock now really regretted throwing Titus at Knox without a second thought in a last-ditch effort to stop or slow her down. Sorry buddy, looks like you are going to be on life support for a while, but you seem to be healing faster than Zeus of Chaos, so you should be up on your feet soon. Ashlock sighed as he looked back at his sign-in system. Idolatry daily sign-in. System. Day, 3542. Daily credit, 15. Sacrifice credit, 2,694. Sign in. Realistically, he only needed chaos to be operational to survive if Knox returned right now, so if he signed in and then devoured as many corpses as he could find, he should have credits enough to repair chaos and a few spare for his consuming abyss skill if needed. Bucket. System sign me in. Sign in successful, 2,709 credits consumed. Ashlock watched his daily and sacrificial credits drop to 0, and another notification appeared. Unlocked an S-grade skill, dimensional overlap. Ashlock felt the world around him shudder and tear as if it were made of paper. He saw glimpses of the other side. A strange void filled with celestial fog and large creatures that moved between the clusters of sealed pocket realms. Are those the world walkers? Ashlock wondered as he felt information flood his mind. Not only about the new skill, he also felt himself connecting with the celestial fog and saw glimpses of millions of pocket realms flash through his mind. And then it all ceased as quickly as it had begun. Reality snapped back to normal. Peaceful blue skies and red vine peak replaced the void and horrors just beyond the veil of reality. System, do you have to give me an out-of-body experience every time I get an S-grade skill? Ashlock complained as he made sure he was all put back together. That wasn't the worst one he had experienced, but it was certainly up there. There was a sudden ripple in the void, and an exhausted-looking maple materialized on his branches and seemed to be sniffing the air. Oh. Nice of you to reappear. Ashlock said with sarcasm dripping from his every word, what's your excuse for going missing this time? You know Knox wouldn't have gotten away if you were here. I hope you have a really good explanation, like destroying a country or something. As usual, Maple offered no such explanation and just kept sniffing at the air in confusion and glancing around. Whatever, Ashlock dismissed the fluffy eldritch squirrel and focused on his new skill. I see, how interesting. Dimensional overlap is effectively an offensive version of the mystic realm. Ashlock mulled over the information a little more and condensed it down. Basically, I can temporarily overlap a pocket realm onto the real world in an area around my body at the cost of sacrificial credits depending on how large I want the area to be and what chi type 1 want to use. The skill cost is reduced if I use a pocket realm with the same affinity as the body I cast it from. However, this skill does not transport anyone to the pocket realm but instead overlays it onto a localized area. In summary, Ashlock could alter the environment around himself or one of his progeny by creating a bubble of a pocket realm just like from his Mystic Realm skill. But unlike his Mystic Realm skill that was designed for training with its time dilation and having a variety of pocket realms to choose from, his new dimensional overlap skill was to be used offensively but ensure he could gain the environmental advantage. I wonder how Knox would enjoy fighting Soul in a pocket realm that's nothing but desert and 10 suns in the sky. Ashlock chuckled evilly. This skill will also come in handy when fighting the Patriarch or any other cultivators out of my league. If I can trap them in a pocket dimension devoid of their chi type, I just have to win in a battle of attrition. Now hyped, he decided to test the skill but realized he would need to acquire some sacrificial credits first. System, why can't you take my chi as payment instead? Why does everything with you have to involve sacrificial credits or nutrients? Ashlock complained as he devoured the nearby pile of corpses. As the mountain peak was filled with the sound of crushing bones and melting corpses, Ashlock activated his new skill. A menu appeared and showed him an expansive list of pocket realms he could conjure. So there is an initial cost and then a fee of 10 sacrificial credits per minute to maintain the skill. Ugh. My poor money. Since he was about to test a new skill, he decided to warn Diana first. Diana, could you move to the other side of the mountain peak? I am about to test something. Diana nodded and got up to leave with Kaida. Deciding on a spatial chi pocket realm that would only encompass a few meters around him as it was the cheapest at 100 credits, he clicked the option and felt reality around him warp and change. However, before the link could be fully established, Maple did something. The pocket realm Ashlock had picked was ripped from his system's grasp, and Ashlock found himself and Red Vine Peak surrounded by the void and stared down by a group of world walkers. Chapter 191, Maple's Family. Ashlock spread out his spiritual senses and confirmed that the entirety of Red Vine Peak was enshrouded within a large void bubble. However, he could still sense his roots that ran under Darklight City and the wilderness, confirming Ashlock's suspicions regarding his new S-grade dimensional overlap skill. It created a pocket realm in a bubble around him, but foes or his allies could escape at any time by simply walking out of it, so its size mattered, but that drove up the costs drastically. Should I teleport Diana and Kaida out of here? Ashlock wondered as he saw Diana nervously backtrack toward his trunk with Kaida at her side under the petrifying gaze of two giant alien pupilless eyes that floated in the void. One was a dark red, like a dying star, while the other was a misty blue. Maple, what did you do? Ashlock asked the fluffy squirrel, but the menace raised his paw as if asking him to be quiet. Ashlock then felt a ripple through the void as incomprehensible whispers began between Maple and the two giant eyes belonging to titanic creatures barely visible in the eternal darkness. Maple then leapt off his branch and floated up to put himself between Ashlock and the world wookers. The whispers calmed down, and under the alien gazes, Maple suddenly exploded outward in a mass of wiggling black tentacles as if an eldritch abomination had broken free from the tiny squirrel's body. Kaida hissed loudly and moved to protect Diana, who stumbled back and pushed herself against Ashlock's trunk as if hoping he would swallow her up. Which he could technically do, but he would rather just teleport her outside of the pocket dimension as he was confident these world wookers would be unable to affect anything outside the pocket realm's range. However, he wasn't sure how the two world wookers would react to him suddenly mobilizing his chi to create the portal, so he refrained. The wiggling mass of tentacles that had been Maple began to condense down and take on a humanoid shape. Ashlock watched in awe as the eldritch thing morphed into a naked, androgynous humanoid body with no defining features other than long white hair that reached his legs, fluffy ears, and a white tail that curled around his entire form. He floated back down and stood on one of Ashlock's more exposed branches. Now you two do the same, Maple said in a perfectly neutral voice as he pointed to the eyes in the sky. The two eyes looked at one another, and then they began to condense down into humanoid forms. Unlike Maple, who retained some of his squirrel body features, these two world wookers were androgynous humans who reminded Ashlock of those plastic toys with no defining characteristics of either gender. Although their shoulder-length dark red and icy blue hair that matched their totally black eyes gave them a slightly feminine look. Apologies for showing such unsightly forms, one of the world wookers spoke in that same neutral voice as Maple. This is one of the first times we have shown ourselves to a human, so we just copied your basic genetic signature. So I hope this appearance is less traumatizing to gaze upon for the human present. The question was directed at Diana, and she hesitantly nodded, yes, it's better. But it feels like I am looking at a strange reflection of myself. Ashlock compared the two and now understood why the world wookers had a slightly feminine look, as they used Diana as their basis. However, Maple looked different, and it took a moment for Ashlock to realize that Maple had used Stella as the basis for his humanoid form, as he had a bit of a roguish-looking face. Well, we could take on the appearance of a tree or a rock if you prefer. The world wooker suggested. To us, appearance is a useless concept that constrains our soul to a certain vessel that will limit our power. And no, it's okay. I can get used to it, Diana said awkwardly as she stepped away from Ashlock's trunk and sat on the bench while shaking, and Kaida stopped hissing and calmed down. Maple, is this the tree you told us about last time you visited us? The blue-haired world wooker asked as it flew a lap around his canopy and squinted at his leaves. I can see why he caught your interest. Ashlock didn't like the sound of that, so he switched topics. Maple, are these your siblings? He asked using abyssal whispers, surprisingly carrying his voice through the void as if he were speaking normally. After using the mystic realm for the first time, he remembered Larry mentioning meeting Maple's family, so he assumed these world wookers might be related to Maple. Yeah, they are my elder siblings, Maple grinned. I don't see them often after entering a pact with you and being confined by this realm's suffocating pressure that takes all my chi to endure. But whenever you have accessed the mystic realm in the past, I have taken the opportunity to contact them. That was self-inflicted, the red-haired world wooker scolded Maple. Didn't anyone tell you not to enter suspicious portals and agree to pacts with magical trees? Maple blinked his liquid golden eyes. No. But I have no regrets. It's more fun down here. You seem more talkative than usual, Maple. Ashlock was surprised at how normal Maple and the world wookers were, and since when did you have a human form? Well, talking is a waste of energy, and so is fighting off those weaklings that keep bothering you for some reason. Maple licked his lips. As for this human form, I had a feast recently, which helped me gather a large amount of energy for my growth, so I can display this form for a short while now, but only in this void. Would be a waste to use anything but that small squirrel body outside. Interesting. So Maple seems so lazy all the time because he is conserving energy. Ashlock mused to himself, And is that what he was doing instead of helping us against the merchants? Of slaughtering some poor monsters for food? Wait, Maple, is that you? Diana shouted in surprise, what is going on? What are you? Where did that cute squirrel go? Ashlock realized Diana had likely been terrified out of her mind being stared down at by two world walkers and hadn't been keeping up with the conversation all that well. In your language, we are known as world walkers, and our purpose is to guard the void. The red-haired one answered with a hint of pride, and the blue-haired one continued, we are superior life forms enslaved by heaven to ensure cultivators only ever ascend and don't travel back down to cause extinction. Maple snorted, you two are both children like me. Don't act like you do anything other than float around aimlessly absorbing ambient chi that escapes the pocket realms. You couldn't even stop a monarch realm if you tried. Neither seemed to refute Maple's claim, but they did glare at him, and Ashlock felt the void ripple with power as if an invisible battle was occurring between the trio. Sibling banter aside, Ashlock found the description of their purpose a little confusing, as hadn't Senior Lee traveled down from a higher realm. What about Senior Lee? Ashlock asked Maple, didn't he travel down from a higher realm? That's actually one of the reasons we wanted to meet you. Do you attract the attention of a true immortal? Blue-haired said as they floated down and tapped his trunk. Could you open up? Confused, Ashlock opened his demonic eye and blue-hair didn't even flinch as their gazes met. A true immortal. What's that? Ashlock asked, but blue-haired was busy humming and staring into his eye. There are some people even heaven can't contain within its own rules, and they are known as the true immortals. Red-haired explained as they floated down. From Maple's description, Senior Lee is likely one of them, and they are not beings to be trifled with. Ashlock wasn't that surprised that Senior Lee was some godlike being. He had basically paused reality, and Ashlock swore he saw swirling galaxies within the man's eyes once. What did bother Ashlock was that the world walker referred to Maple with the name Stella had given the squirrel when they first met. Do you two have names? Ashlock asked as he looked at both of them with his demonic eyes and felt confused when he saw literally nothing but black holes in a humanoid shape. Not ones you would understand, the blue-haired world walker replied, why? Do you want to give us lower realm once? I mean, I can, but why do you call Maple? Maple? Ashlock asked. The two world walkers exchanged a look. We aren't. The red-haired said, we are calling them Maple. Okay, something fucked up is going on here. Ashlock grumbled to himself, their mouth movements definitely didn't match the word Maple, yet that's what I heard. Is it my language of the world's skill acting up? Let me test something, Ashlock told the world walkers. Blue hair, your name can be Neptune, and red hair can be Mars. Now tell me your world walker names. Mars. Neptune. Yep, that's definitely some system bullshit. Ashlock thought, my language skill is now translating their supposed incomprehensible names into the ones I assigned them in my head. Do you understand them? Diana asked nervously as she shifted to the very edge of the bench, as far from Neptune and Mars as possible, and was downing Mind Fortress pills like they were Skittles. To me, their names sound like strange gargles that seem to stroke my brain from within. It's deeply unsettling. Neptune looked at Diana in confusion. Aren't you a daughter of the Ravina clan? Why would our names unsettle you? The void began to tremble as if something from the outside was trying to crush them. Shut up, Mars yelled as they covered Neptune's mouth with their hand. A tense moment passed, and the void eventually returned to its usual calm. Neptune looked around and then pulled Mars's hand down. Sorry, Neptune whispered, I forgot bloodlines were forbidden knowledge to the lowest realm. Can you two stop messing around and hurry up with what I brought you here for? Maple shouted down from the tree branch he was standing on, I can't keep this link to the void open forever. Whatever gives Ashlock power is wrestling me for control. What did you come for? Ashlock asked and began to worry they would stumble upon his system as. It was most certainly the thing wresting Maple for control. Neptune returned to poking their head through the slit in his trunk and inspecting his eye while Mars answered. Remember how we mentioned we were enslaved by heaven? Well, Maple found a way to break from its control. Ow. You, Mars replied, and we were hoping you could be our way out of those shackles as well. Isn't that because of the pact Maple and I agreed on? And what do you mean enslaved by heaven's control? What does it make you do? It's more about what they can't do. Maple grumbled from his branch, they can't leave the void. Ever. It may be vast, but it's their prison. As Maple said, Mars nodded, although Maple is significantly suppressed in your realm, He can feast on condensed chi in the form of souls and grow quicker. Within a short time, he will overtake us despite being centuries younger. Ashlock didn't want to be that guy, but just maybe heaven's rules were a good idea. One Maple running around was already unhinged enough, but imagine if all these world walkers could freely wander around eating to their heart's content. There would be no realms with anything alive left. There's certainly something strange, Neptune concluded, other than a fragment of divinity gifted by that seniorly, which means Ashlock can rise through the void between the realms of creation without being bothered by other world walkers. But there's something else semi-dormant accumulating energy, but the only way I can detect it is because of energy going missing, which is impossible. Is Neptune talking about my system and its daily sign in credit? Ashlock pondered, as that was the only explanation unless his system took in some of his chi. But it was very reassuring that Neptune could not actually detect his system. Do you have any idea what it could be, Ashlock? Mars asked. It's not every day you run into a talking spirit tree with higher authority over the world's laws than even heaven, to the point he can break a world walker from their enslavement, which is part of their existence since birth in the demonic realm. Not a clue, Ashlock effortlessly lied. There wasn't a chance in hell he would tell these world devourers about it, even if he had a way to free them. Maybe whatever is absorbing energy is affecting Ashlock without him knowing. Neptune suggested as they clapped their hands. Oh, I know. Why don't we try to form a pact? Neptune wishes to form a pact. Chapter 192, Divinity Tier. Ashlock stared at the system message floating in front of Neptune's face. Neptune wishes to form a pact. As he had learned with Maple, a pact involved mutual cooperation where both parties could act independently without the other's permission. For example, Maple often went off to do his own thing without Ashlock ordering him to, and he could also deny Ashlock's request for help. Whereas Larry, who was a summoned creature by the system, wasn't even allowed to evolve or pick his evolution path without Ashlock's approval. If I were to enter a pact with Neptune, I would gain another formidable ally that could help me against the incoming beast tide, the Blood Lotus Patriarch, and finally, the otherworld tree in the heart of the Celestial Empire that wants to eat me. Ashlock paused, but Maple is completely unhinged and undependable. Would I really be able to coexist with another, even more powerful Maple? He goes off and does his own thing or spends the days sleeping, which I now know is because he is trying to conserve energy to grow stronger. But still, he's so useless half the time. Ashlock liked having some level of control over his surroundings and allies, as he lacked control over his body and could not move. Betrayals became more dangerous as he could not flee, and if Neptune signed the pact and then went off by themselves to wage war with the Blood Lotus sect and subsequently draw enemies toward him, there was nothing he could do except fight. It was risky, but he was still tempted. At the end of the day, if they entered a pact, Neptune would become his ally, and who wouldn't want an even more powerful void monster than Maple on their side? That small squirrel alone had trapped a 9th stage Star Core Realm Void Mind Elder, slaughtered the Winter Wrath and Evergreen Grand Elders, and even caused 2 families to go to war with each other over a misunderstanding caused by Maple and Stella's mischief. Neptune tilted their head as if confused as to why he was stalling. They are Maple's family. It wouldn't be fair for me to deny them, Ashlock sighed as he mentally accepted the pact notification. Pact failed, divinity tier too low. Neptune frowned as she looked at her hand as if confused. I felt for a brief moment that Ashlock had accepted the pact, but then it stopped. Why? Ashlock, what happened? Maple asked, hanging upside down from a branch by his feet and looking at him inquisitively with those adorable golden eyes. Did you change your mind about accepting my siblings last second? Although accepting a pact with such powerful beings related to a rascal like you might be a bad idea. Ashlock said, almost laughing at Maple's scowl. That's not what happened. I think my divinity is too low to make a pact with you, Neptune. Neptune became lost in thought, evident by how she stared blankly at the sky. Let me try. Mars closed their eyes, and a similar system message appeared. Mars wishes to form a pact. Ashlock accepted it without any hesitation, but once again, it bounced. Pact failed, divinity tier too low. I see what you mean. Mars stepped away, also confused. Say, Maple, you claim these 2 are your elder siblings. What is the age and power gap between you? Ashlock asked the hanging Maple. He had failed to summon Maple in the past with 2,600 sacrificial credits, as his cultivation realm had apparently been too low, but he had managed to form a pact with Maple once he hopped through the rift in his squirrel form, So why was it now blocking his pact with Neptune and Mars? It's hard to compare as we operate on a different timescale and cultivation path to you and the humans. A century for us is like a year for you, Maple said, but if I had to guess, I am like a newborn at the nascent soul realm, but I was weaker than that before coming here and forming a pact with you. Meanwhile, Neptune and Mars are in their teens at like the monarch realm. Neptune and Mars exchanged looks and nodded, about that, yeah. Mars agreed. So, a massive gap in power and age. Ashlock mused to himself, but what about this divinity tier my system is talking about? He opened his status screen and soon found the answer. Demonic Demi-Divine Tree, age, 9. Star Core, 5th stage. Soul type, Amethyst, Spatial. Divine Fragment SSS 1/9. He was a demi-divine tree that was still missing 8 of the SSS grade divine fragments. Senior Lee had mentioned that once he collected all 9, he would ascend to an actual divine being and be able to reach heaven. Would he need to collect all of them to make a pact with Mars and Neptune, or only another one? If the system message was to be believed, it suggested there were tiers to divinity, and his current tier was simply too low. I just need to collect at least one, if not a few more fragments, before I can make a mutual pact with Mars and Neptune, Ashlock assumed as he closed his status screen. It was a bit of a revelation to learn that each divine fragment was more significant than he had first thought. And maybe more upgrades were waiting for him when he collected the next fragment. Which brought him to his following line of thought. How and where could he get more fragments? Neptune and Mars, I believe the reason I can't form pacts with you is because I need more fragments of divinity. Senior Lee gave me the first one and mentioned only 8 more existed. Is that true? That's what I heard, Neptune replied, looking at Mars for confirmation. Yeah, same. The Elder World Walkers have spoken about it before, Mars nodded thoughtfully. Apparently, the strongest beings in each layer of creation possess one of these fragments, and we are told not to mess with them and let them ascend if they so wish. Why wouldn't they ascend to the next layer? Ashlock asked in confusion. It didn't make sense that there would be one powerful being guarding a fragment on each layer. Wouldn't they all rush toward heaven with their unlimited cultivation potential like him? Mars blinked, because it would be suicide. Everyone would love to get their hands on a divine fragment, so they will be swamped by entire sects of more powerful cultivators when they appear in the next layer of creation. Neptune hummed in agreement, but even with his language translation skill running in the background, the hum sounded otherworldly, like an eldritch tune. I've heard of those stories. A few fools try their luck and ascend anyway, and once they inevitably die, whoever grabbed the fragment will make their way back down to the lower layer of creation so they can live in relative peace as the strongest on that layer of creation. I thought people couldn't go back down once they ascended. Ashlock asked. The World Walkers are instructed by heaven to leave divine beings alone. Neptune shrugged. It's not like they can go back down too far anyways, as the lack of chi in the atmosphere will cause their cultivation to degrade to the point they can be killed, and someone else can steal the fragment and then ascend or stay there. Ashlock absorbed the information and went silent momentarily as he mulled it over. These fragments were starting to sound more and more like bad news, and shouldn't people start to hunt him down on this layer of creation since he had a fragment? Senior Lee did mention that the World Tree would catch on to the fact I have a divine fragment and start to hunt me down. How does a Monarch Realm World Tree hunt anyway? Ashlock sighed. He had a feeling he didn't want to find out. Even if the World Tree lacked a mysterious system like him, it was over 2 entire realms above him and likely had close ties to the celestial empire surrounding it like a fortress. If Knox could escape him while being only a few stages higher in the same realm, what was he supposed to do against something 2 entire realms higher? I worry about the Blood Lotus Patriarch, who is barely at the nascent soul realm and this incoming beast tide, whereas the Celestial Empire hasn't had to move to avoid a beast tide since their founding and they don't fear the demonic sects. Which means they must be far more formidable than any demonic sect out here in the wilderness. Ashlock then set his sights on the future and decided to ask the World Walkers while he still could. So when I reach Monarch Realm and initiate this era of ascension, won't I be jumped on by all the people from the higher realm who are after my fragment of divinity? Yep. Maple nodded smugly. It's going to be a feast to remember. Right? Ashlock appreciated the optimism but didn't feel it would be that easy. But I am still too weak and small to eat them all by myself, Maple pouted, so that's why I ask my siblings for help. We have a pact to protect one another, after all. Ashlock was stunned and now felt like an ass for debating whether he should accept the pact with the world wookers. Okay, how powerful are people in the next layer of creation? Ashlock asked quickly, because I won't be able to increase my divinity tier until I kill the strongest being on that layer, and only then can I accept a pact with you too. I think. So I need to find a way to not die instantly the moment I ascend. How strong do my allies and myself need to be? Mars nodded, needing to get the other fragment sounds about right and to answer the question regarding strength. There is one more cultivation realm above the monarch realm on the next layer of creation. No matter what layer of creation you are born on, you start in the chi realm like everyone else. But you can progress through the realms and reach a higher ceiling faster due to denser chi. For the first layer of creation you are on now, the monarch realm is the ceiling, but on the next layer of creation, there is one more above called the sovereign of reality's realm. The void began to tremble again like it had when Neptune mentioned that Diana was part of the Ravina clan, which was apparently forbidden knowledge as it had something to do with bloodlines. You just can't keep your mouth shut about that stuff, Maple grumbled, and Mars frowned slightly. Looks like we are out of time, Neptune said as she glanced up at the collapsing void. You can always talk to us again if Maple. No, this was a one-time thing. Maple shook his head. Almost all the energy I got from my feast was wasted on this conversation with you two. Well, I will see you again when Ashlock accesses the mystic realm using a power he supposedly doesn't understand. Neptune said in such a neutral voice and with an expressionless face that it was hard to tell if she was serious, joking, or actually angry that he was lying, especially you human. Me. Diana, who had been quietly listening into the conversation, seemed bewildered as she pointed to herself under the emotionless gaze of Neptune. Yes, come find me the next time you enter the mystic realm. I have something to show you, Neptune smiled slightly, which made Diana shiver. Okay. Diana reluctantly replied. And on that note, the void collapsed in an instant. Neptune and Mars were gone in the blink of an eye, and Maple briefly became a mass of wiggling tentacles as he reverted to his squirrel form. Dimensional overlap restored. Ashlock noticed another 100 sacrificial credits get drained from his sign-in system as reality around him warped, and he felt his consciousness expand into the void beyond reality and through the celestial fog until it finally latched onto the pocket realm he had picked in the menu previously and then pulled it back with him through the tier in reality. A bubble of spatial chi expanded out from his trunk as the epicenter for a few meters. It felt strange. It was like being trapped inside a fish tank with liquid chi so dense it was swirling around him. Diana began to cough violently. She quickly grabbed Kaida and stumbled out of the pocket realm that barely enshrouded his entire body. Since she only had to walk a few meters to reach the edge of the bubble, Diana managed to leave before Ashlock could even help. The boundary of the pocket realm was a thick layer of spatial chi that she had to push through with a bit of effort, but other than that, she could leave freely. So I will definitely need to find a way to keep someone in here to stop them escaping so easily like that in actual combat, Ashlock mused. Luckily, I have my vines and ints that are great for that. Ashlock then noticed his star core begin to fill up faster than usual as all his leaves began pulling in the surrounding spatial chi and draining the pocket realm. Wait, I can cultivate using dimensional overlap. Ashlock was perplexed as he had initially thought dimensional overlap would be a perfect attack or support skill as it would allow him to alter environments to suit his allies or counter his enemies' affinities, but he could also use it to power himself up like how his allies used the mystic realm. Guess that's an S-grade skill for you. Ashlock chuckled as he tried to gaze out of the spatial pocket realm but found everything outside was very blurry and tainted in a purple hue. Okay, so there's some drawbacks here. My allies might struggle to shoot at enemies outside the pocket realm if they can't see through the bubble, but I can get around that. Shifting his view through his roots, he could now look at himself from the outside. Diana was standing there with Kaida, watching the giant dome of spatial chi that covered around a third of Red Vine Peak and the entirety of his trunk. Interesting, looks like I can use this as a sort of defense or camouflage skill if I pick the right pocket realm. Wouldn't a pocket realm filled with illusion chi be good to hide myself from powerful foes? Or would I just stick out like a sore thumb? Ashlock stopped rambling on in his mind and decided to ask Diana with abyssal whispers, Hey Diana, could you fetch Stella for me? I need her help testing this new pocket realm I have summoned. Sure. Diana blinked a few times before her brain kicked into gear. I will go get her as quickly as I can. Diana said as feathered wings sprouted from her back. She then ran toward the white stone palace while shrouded in mist and used her wings to glide between the trees for extra speed. That's pretty cool, Ashlock thought as he focused back on the peak, and then he remembered Titus. His only spatial chi and the pile of black wood was slowly repairing himself with a combination of the chi Ashlock was providing him and the chi his own star core produced. But it was pretty slow due to how extensive the damage was, and there was no way in hell he was paying hundreds of credits to repair him instantly. Titus, crawl your way into the pocket realm, Ashlock instructed the Ent as Titus's eyes flared up with purple flames, and he began to move. I want to see if it helps you heal faster in here. Chapter 193, Elder Mo's Lesson. Stella finished her dash across the mountain peak and paused in the white stone palace courtyard. Despite the fight last night, groups of Redclaw youngsters were silently cultivating, so Stella made sure not to disturb them and made her way over to the destroyed half of the palace. You see, I told you it got destroyed. Stella heard the Grand Elder ranting at somebody as she exited a portal and saw Elder Mo staring at the scorched earth and rubble beside the Grand Elder with a look of disbelief. You're telling me a group of merchants did all this? Elder Mo glanced around while scratching his balding head. What affinities were they? Spatial, light and darkness, Stella answered, and both men turned to look at her. Ah, Mistress Stella, I'm glad to see you are all right after last night's chaos, the Grand Elder said sincerely as he walked over. I apologize for not coming to help sooner as I was deep in cultivation and didn't expect them to attack with the Immortal overlooking the meeting. Stella shook her head. Neither did we, but those ruthless bastards were after the earrings the Immortal gifted me as a child and never had plans to conduct business with us. So we were rather caught off guard. I still don't see how those three could cause all this, Elder Mo commented as he walked over while keeping his eyes on the destruction. Maybe an earth and fire cultivator could do this. But the three affinities you listed don't match the destruction. Spatial is best for transport and assassinations, as is darkness. Great affinities for delving into rifts because even if they get injured or caught out, the light cultivator could offer healing and shields. But they aren't affinities I would associate with complete destruction. They were a formidable group for sure, Stella agreed as she glanced at the white stone palace that looked like it had been hit by a meteor. The Immortal killed the spatial mage a second into the battle, and we would have disposed of the other two as well, but Lucius, the light cultivator, started to harness the power of a sun god and could blast us with powerful light attacks. And if that wasn't bad enough, Knox used some artifact that locked the Immortal out from assisting us. Ah. It's all making far more sense now, Elder Mo nodded to himself. Well, this looks like a nightmare to deal with, so I'll be off to the forge, and I'll have to postpone my peaceful walk to later this evening. What a bother. Just a moment. I have something for the both of you to do, Stella said, and both men paused. How may I be of service, mistress? The Grand Elder asked, and Elder Mo waited there patiently. This part of the palace was being left empty for the cultivators we planned to bring into the sect from the academy and elsewhere, right? Indeed, the Grand Elder nodded. Well, we need to start getting those cultivators moved in and trained up, Stella said. If that battle last night taught us anything, it's that we need more people. So can you go and fetch Douglas from Darklight City and bring him back here? He has a lot of work to do. As you wish, mistress, the Grand Elder smiled as he summoned a sword to fly on and also a cloak to cover up his shredded clothes from his battle with the wolves. Without further delay, he hopped on the levitating sword and took off in a blazing trail of crimson flames toward Darklight City. Now that foolish old man is gone, how can I assist you, Mistress Stella? Elder Mo asked respectfully. Stella summoned her sword in its sheath. I was wondering if Elder Mo could use his spirit fire to empower my sword. Elder Mo stepped forward and gestured for her to hand him the sword. Once he grasped it, he withdrew the black-tinted blade from the obsidian leather sheath adorned with a golden star pattern and whistled in awe as he held it carefully and marveled at its craftsmanship. This is a darn well-made blade you have here, and bloody expensive too. The Immortal gifted it to me a while ago, Stella said casually, and didn't mention they had looted it for free. I agree it's a beautiful blade. But when I tried to cut through Knox while she was shrouded in armor of darkness, I could not cut through. Elder Mo stopped inspecting the blade and looked at her funny. What cultivation realm was this Knox person? 9th stage Star Core, I believe. Why? And what time of the day was it? Dusk, transitioning to night. Elder Mo stared at her blankly. What? Stella asked, crossing her hands below her chest and not enjoying Elder Mo's deadpan stare. There's nothing wrong with the blade, mistress, Elder Mo eventually replied. but there might be with your head. Stella narrowed her eyes. What are you suggesting? Look, what you are asking for is basically impossible. Elder Mo quickly changed the subject. It's like telling a mortal with a shovel to dig through solid rock and then getting confused when they fail. There's nothing wrong with the shovel. It's just not going to happen. What if the shovel was empowered with chi? Stella countered. But the example was with a mortal. I'm not a mortal, though, Stella replied and pointed at her sword. In Elder Mo's hands, and that isn't a shovel. Look, I gave that metaphor for a reason. Elder Mo sighed. Even if I empower your sword with spirit fire, you still can't cut a god in half. Just like a mortal can't shovel through a mountain. You know what? Never mind. What is it you want me to do? Stella grinned. See, there we go. I just want the sword to always cut. No matter what. If I can get the blade to someone's neck, I want it to cut through. Yeah. No, Elder Mo handed Stella back her sword. Ghostly flames appeared in his hand, and he gazed into it. Spirit fire is exactly as it sounds. It's a fire that contains my spirit will, vigor, and life experiences. I can condense it and hammer it into a weapon. So when you wield a blade imbued with my spirit fire, it's like it contains a piece of me. He then snuffed out the ghostly flame and put his hands behind his back. His deep gaze met Stella's, and she almost flinched away due to how serious he looked. I have not cut that which cannot be cut. That is something in the realms of sword Dao or a talent one could acquire from an immortal swordsman's inheritance. As to cut that which cannot be cut means to cut all, even time and the fabric of reality itself. Stella fell deep into thought. Cutting time is most certainly out of my capabilities, but the fabric of reality. Now that's something I could possibly achieve as a spatial cultivator with time and practice. Before she knew it, she gave Elder Mo a brief bow. Thank you for this teaching. It has given me a lot to think about. Elder Mo gave a hearty chuckle. The young always make the most outrageous requests, and it's the duty of the old to guide them on the correct path. If you are willing, I can imbue the sword with my battle spirit or intuition, but I would ask you to wait until after my cultivation has stepped into the star core realm so I can offer you the best I can. I don't think I want a piece of Elder Mo inside this majestic sword Ashlock gifted me anymore. But I could give him one of my spare swords just so I can see if having his level of intuition can let me hone my swordsmanship some more. That would be great, and I'm sure you will be at the Star Core realm by the end of the month, Stella said. The Mystic Realm opens in 10 days, after all. Oh, how fun, Elder Mo grinned. I wonder if anyone else will find an inheritance this time. He gave a short bow. This chat has been pleasant, Mistress Stella, and I wish you good luck on cutting that which cannot be cut, but I must leave now, or the forge will grow cold. Stella waved the old man off as he gave one last look at the scorched rubble and then vanished into the white stone palace. Oh, Stella. There you are, a familiar voice called across the mountain peak. Elder Margaret, Stella said as she turned and then paused. It took a moment for her to understand what she was seeing, but then she remembered firmly placing the skin improvement truffle into Elder Margaret's hand the last time they saw each other. You look different, Stella said with a strained smile, a little too different, but a good different. Elder Margaret, who had Sebastian in tow, shook her head and laughed a little at Stella's nonsense. I know just how you feel, as I felt the same way when I looked at myself in a mirror after eating that truffle you gave me. I almost thought I had died and returned to when I was in my 30s. Oh, you know who you remind me of? Stella tapped her chin as she looked at Elder Margaret up and down. Don't tell me it's Amber. Amber. Elder Margaret rolled her eyes. I've heard that all morning, and let me tell you, being called an older Amber is not the compliment people think it is. It's just so true though. Stella laughed. You look like her mother. We aren't that closely related. Elder Margaret shook her head. Her short crimson hair went in her eyes, so she reached up and tucked it behind her ear. There are so many generations between us, I don't even know what I would be to her, to be honest. Anyway, we are getting off track, and I have a lot to sort out today. Elder Margaret then stepped aside and gave Stella a full view of a beaten-up but alive Sebastian Silverspire. Stella raised a brow. Yes. The deal with the merchants may have fallen through, but you still gave them pills in the name of the Ashlock Trading Company and received payment in a roundabout way. Sebastian said calmly. I just wanted to inquire when Riker and I may receive our rightful 15% share of this payment. What payment? Stella asked, genuinely confused. The spatial rings, Sebastian replied. You did seize the spatial rings from the merchant corpses, right? Oh, they want a share of the loot. Diana isn't here right now, but she would know what to do. I wasn't the one supposed to be handling payments anyway. You can ask Diana. We just want a share of the spirit stones and crowns. Any artifacts or other items in the ring are yours to keep. Sebastian gave a weary smile, considering my contribution in the fight last night, and also the Silver Spire name being overused, justifies at least this much. I don't see plans for another distributor for the pills lined up anytime soon, and Riker won't have a chance to win the inheritance war if we earn nothing for months to come. Stella was really finding it hard to say no when looking at the beaten-up man, and what he said was reasonable. Fine, but don't tell Diana, Stella said in a hushed tone as she brought out the spatial rings she had spent all night and a lot of chi breaking into and guesstimated around 15% of the spirit stones and crowns, and then handed the pile to Sebastian. Sebastian graciously accepted the pile like a true butler. He didn't even comment on its rather pathetic size as the merchants hadn't carried much money on them, which further cemented Stella's theory that they never planned to buy any pills in the first place. Thank you, Stella, I appreciate this, Sebastian said as he stowed away the riches. I will return to my room and recoup from the battle now. I could probably get you a healer if you need, Stella suggested, but Sebastian waved her off. No need. These wounds will heal within the next few days. If that is all, I will be off. Stella shrugged, if you say so. Oh. Say hello to Riker for me. Sure thing, Sebastian said as he walked off with a stream of silver orbiting his waist. By the way, Stella, Kane Azircrest was wondering if he could meet you and discuss pills. Elder Margaret asked. I want to take a break from pills for now, Stella said as she unsheathed her sword and gazed at her reflection in the polished metal, perhaps after the mystic realm. I would be down to talk to him then. But for now, I want to hone my swordsmanship and further my cultivation. Sure, I understand, Elder Margaret smiled, it's always good to switch it up sometimes. I will tell Kane what you said and return to my duties. Stella nodded, watched Elder Margaret vanish into the white stone palace, and then sighed. Anytime she thought about alchemy, she got a flashback to seeing the merchants' enthusiastic faces while trying her creations and then trying to kill her a moment later. Pills are great, but I could have died last night if I was even a little weaker or didn't have my bloodline power. Stella surveyed the destruction with a heavy heart. This could have been her grave if Knox hadn't been so restricted in her techniques due to Lucius. She needed to get actually stronger, and spending days on end in a dark cavern creating pills wasn't going to get her there. What in the fucking 9 realms of hell happened here? Douglas shouted in the distance, and Stella couldn't help but chuckle as she saw the Grand Elder bring Douglas and Elaine back from the city. The three jumped off, and the Grand Elder waved his hand to retrieve the sword. Hey Stella, how are you? Elaine asked while Douglas stood gobsmacked in the background. Exhausted and a little distraught, but still have all my limbs, so can't be too sorry for myself. What about you? Been busy. Oh. Nothing as dramatic as you clearly, Elaine laughed, but Stella could see bags of exhaustion under her eyes, ruining her pretty face. Class is much more lively, and people pay attention and ask me questions now, which is nice, Elaine groaned. I just wish they wouldn't also try to get on my good side all the time. Like when I eat or walk around, I get flocked. I've started to ask Douglas to walk with me to keep them off, but that just started annoying rumors. That sounds like a battlefield of its own, Stella patted Elaine on the shoulder. I heard from the immortal that school can be a torturous affair for both student and teacher. Thanks. Elaine replied, I thankfully got the day off today, though, so I decided to come and check out what happened here with Douglas. They both turned to look at Douglas, who was walking around in disbelief and kicking at the scorched rubble while having his hands clasped behind his head and looking on the verge of a breakdown. He then paused and crouched down and seemed to be poking something. Is this fucking Jeb? What happened to him? He shouted over his shoulder at Stella. Oh, he got punched by a demigod, Stella laughed, dead as a pile of rocks, I'm afraid. That's not good at all, Douglas groaned as he stood. Jeb was made from Roderick Turreforge's soul. If he is dead and his soul has departed, the Grand Elder of my family also knows of his death because of a soul-tracking artifact attached to all science. Stella cursed under her breath, God damn it. We arrested Roderick at the alchemy tournament in front of everyone. It might be fine for a while, Douglas half reassured, the Turreforge family is far from here, and they would need to pass through the territories of both the Void Mind and Skyrend families, which isn't going to happen without issues. Stella. What now? Stella grumbled. She had come here just to have a quick conversation with Elder Mo. What is with all these people wanting to talk to her? A large shadow shrouded in a fog barely landed in front of her without falling over, and as the mist cleared, Stella saw Diana with her raven wings spread out and looking terribly distressed. Stella, it was awful. Diana said so quickly she mumbled her words. I woke up and then met Maple's siblings, then learned I am part of some ancient clan that I can't mention the name of, and now Ashlock is stuck in a pocket realm of spatial chi and asked me to get you. Wait, what? Stella blinked in confusion. Maple's family. Ancient clan. Pocket realm. I was literally gone for half an hour. Stella thought as she clicked a portal into existence. How could so much have happened? Chapter 194, Spatial Concepts. Ashlock observed Titus, who dragged himself into the bubble of spatial chi that was the pocket realm he had summoned with his new S-grade dimensional overlap skill. The ent had already visibly healed in the short time he had been awake. System, how much would it be to heal Titus now? A message popped into existence and overlaid the ent. Titus has sustained 62% damage. Repair for 930 SC. So after around an hour of being connected to me and bathing in the spatial chi of my offspring, the number went from 64% to 62%, and the required credits dropped from 960 to 930, Ashlock noted. It was slower than Titus had healed himself in the past, and the only explanation Ashlock could come up with was that he was splitting his chi reserves between all his ints to heal them right now. This conclusion was further enforced when he noticed Titus begin to heal quicker than he had been outside the spatial pocket realm, meaning the abundant spatial chi was assisting his recovery. Interesting, so that's something to remember with raising too many ints. I can't have the ints all healing off me at the same time if I want one to recover faster, even if I have the chi on hand. Ashlock mused as he felt his leaves graciously suck in the abundant spatial chi and cycle it throughout his body and into his star core. I guess it's like I am a power station and no matter how much power I produce, there's only so much the cables going out can handle. I still don't totally know how that strange black root that the Necroflora sovereign skill uses works. Ashlock then noticed through the blurry purple hue of the pocket realm a shadow of something approaching that looked like a person. Tree, what the hell is going on? Stella shouted after she pushed her head through the pocket realm's outer layer and glanced around. Stella, welcome, Ashlock replied cheerfully through abyssal whispers, come on in, it's lovely in here. Stella squinted at him but then sighed and pushed her whole body through. Huh, strange, she said as she closed her eyes and seemed to be cycling the chi. After a while, she began to mutter, it's not quite as good as the spatial chi in the mystic realm, but it's still quite good. She then opened her eyes and looked up at him, so. What is all of this, and why did Diana mention something about meeting Maple's family and some ancient clan? Oh, that. Ashlock chuckled, I just figured out how to summon a part of a pocket realm of my choice around me using the energy I gained from consuming corpses. However, when I went to test it, Maple used my brief lapse into the mystic realm as an opportunity to see his siblings and wanted me to meet them. It just so happened that Diana was nearby and got pulled into all of it. Maple jumped down from Ashlock's branch in his usual squirrel form and landed perfectly on Stella's head. Why didn't you ask me to come and see your family? Stella pouted as she looked up at the squirrel, making himself comfortable on her head. Are they also cute squirrels? Maple yawned as he spread out on his back. You can meet them in the mystic realm. Stella froze. Did Maple just speak? Yes, Ashlock said, but he doesn't like to talk much as it consumes his energy and makes him more sleepy. Why? Since when could he talk? Stella summoned an acorn and dangled it before Maple's sleeping face. Come on, talk to me. I'll give you as many acorns as you want. Maple reached up and seized the acorn in his paws but gave Stella a resounding no as an answer. Stella collapsed defeatedly on the bench with a hollow look. Why do you eat the acorns anyway? Ashlock asked Maple, you're not even a real squirrel, and I doubt there's any benefit for you. It's not like they are full of chi or are even that tasty. I like them because Stella gives them to me. That wasn't the answer Ashlock was expecting from a baby eldritch horror in the body of a squirrel. What if I gave you acorns? No, Maple grumbled, I only like the ones Stella gives me. Why? Ashlock felt betrayed. Just a moment ago, he had been coming up with a plan to save Maple's family from the void, and they were in a mutual pact, so why wouldn't he like acorns from him? RW, thank you, Maple, Stella gave the smug squirrel a head rub. Sighing in defeat, Ashlock left Maple to his pointless acorn and changed the subject. How was the talk with Elder Mo? Not what I expected, Stella answered as she lowered her hand and got more comfortable on the bench. I told him I wanted to be able to cut anything, and he said that wasn't possible for him to imbue into my weapon with his spirit fire as it's something he has never achieved. He then mentioned that cutting anything would mean cutting time and reality itself, which I found to be a rather interesting idea. How can one cut anything? Ashlock asked. I could see the potential to cut through space with spatial chi, but time. What would that even look like? I don't know, Stella shrugged, but that's my new goal. I want to be the one who can cut all. And a master alchemist? Ashlock asked. Stella nodded, and a master alchemist. And run the Ashlock Trading Company. I never agreed to that, Stella shook her head with Maple effortlessly clinging on. Give that task to Diana, the Grand Elder, or hell, even do it yourself. I want to lurk in the shadows and only show myself when necessary. Do you know how many people came to talk to me within just a few minutes of me being at the Whitestone Palace? How many? Ashlock asked, a little amused. Too many. I even got coerced into giving money to that darn Silver Spire butler, Stella grumbled, although to be fair, they earned it. You gave money to them. Well yeah, it's only fair they got 15% of the stuff we looted from the merchants, Stella clarified. Sebastian assisted in the fight, and we used the Silver Spire name during the meeting to gain some authenticity so the merchants let their guard down enough to swallow the cursed pills. I suppose so, Ashlock said. What's in the rings anyways? Less money than I had hoped, but still a decent amount, Stella replied as she glanced around the strange purple-filled pocket realm. Lots of consumables, artifacts, and clothes. Basically, everything you would need to survive out in the wilderness. Anything useful? Stella shrugged, not a clue. The artifacts don't come with instructions, so I have no idea their value or uses. The consumables are just pills, worse than anything I can make myself, and it's all men's clothes, as the rings are from Lucius and Hammond. I guess we could just sell the artifacts or get someone to verify them. Ashlock considered. It would be a shame to let them sit in a pile like the Void Mind Elder's belongings were in his inventory. Yeah, selling them would be easiest as we need as many spirit stones as possible to construct mountain-sized formations. Stella's eyes lit up. Oh, actually, there was a technique manual in Hammond's ring with some advanced spatial concepts. A book manifested in her hand, and she flicked through the pages. Here are some of the titles: Spatial Lock, Spatial Step, Spatial Blades, Time Dilation, Spatial Repulsion and Compression, Spatial Release, Warp Strike, Anchor Seal. Whoa, that's a lot of techniques for a single book. Ashlock was puzzled about how so many seemingly high-level techniques could fit in such a thin book. Oh, these aren't techniques, Stella chuckled, just a page or two dedicated to each one with some notes regarding the general concept in overly complicated and flowery words. I just hoped one of these would help me figure out how to cut through anything. Hearing it was a book of concepts was a little unfortunate, but not all hope was lost. He could learn and even invent spatial techniques with ease nowadays. He mainly just needed some inspiration. Stella spent a moment mumbling to herself as she tried to read one of the chapters and eventually snapped the book with a groan. Clearly, the flowery language was annoying her. Say, Ash, you still didn't tell me much about your new technique. So this is a pocket realm. I'll tell you about it if you show me that book you just closed. Those were some interesting technique ideas, Ashlock replied, and Stella reluctantly nodded, so he continued, I call this technique dimensional overlap. Quite similar to the mystic realm, but I have to expend great energy to maintain it. Ashlock then fell silent momentarily as he saw another 10 sacrificial credits vanish from his system screen alongside the 200 he spent summoning it in the first place. The bundle of credits he had got from devouring that heap of monsters was nearly depleted, which was unfortunate. He had wasted a bit of time talking to Stella, but one of the tests he was conducting while having the pocket realm running was to see if he could fully drain its chi, and that would take some time anyway, and the cost of upkeep wasn't that bad. He had spent around 40 credits so far, which wasn't even enough for a D-grade system draw. It was the combined 240 SC that he had spent that was the real kicker. I thought I could use this skill to cultivate like the rest of you in the mystic realm, but it's not worth it. Far too expensive, and you can feel it too, right? Ashlock asked. It's only been up for a few minutes and already. Stella hummed in agreement. The spatial chi here is already growing thinner. Indeed. It seems like the technique works by surrounding me with a small section of a pocket realm, and it doesn't refill, so as Titus and I absorb the spatial chi, the pocket realm grows weaker. So what will you use this technique for if not for cultivation? Stella asked. Well, I can summon pocket realms of most chi types, so I can use it to give us an environmental advantage around me or my offspring. Just imagine Knox suddenly being enveloped in a pocket realm of light chi. Stella's eyes widened. That would be ideal. Ashlock checked his system and saw he had around 200 sacrificial credits left, meaning he could keep this pocket realm operational for another 20 minutes. Assuming it even lasted that long with him sucking it dry for spatial chi. I can only run this technique for a bit longer. Should we take advantage of the abundant spatial chi and have a duel? Ashlock asked. Sure, that's a great idea. Stella moved to stand up. Not so fast. Let me see those spatial concepts first. Ashlock reminded Stella, I want to try and practice one while we fight. Oh, fine, but I can't read it to you, Stella said as she got the book out again. I hardly understand a word of it. I don't mind. Ashlock grabbed the book, floated it up with telekinesis, and flipped the pages open. Sure enough, he could understand the sentences somewhat due to his language skill doing the heavy lifting. My system gives me powerful skills, but most are support-type skills for empowering my allies or altering my environment, and they usually cost sacrificial credits to use. My only direct attack skill is Consuming Abyss, but that has been with me since the start when it was known as Devour and is my only way to acquire sacrificial credits. Ashlock pondered as he flipped through the pages past the author's introduction and useless boasts about his life. However, just like Hammond or any other cultivator, I have an affinity, and I even have a star core far larger than normal humans. So, I should stop relying on my system so much, hoping it will give me better ways to attack and protect myself. I would rather find solutions to those issues myself with my affinity, just like any other cultivator. I can even wield swords. Ashlock briefly looked at the concept of spatial step and decided to read it aloud for Stella. Flash step was first created by a disciple of the Azure clan. It allows the cultivator to take steps that traverse great distances in an instant, effectively teleporting short to medium ranges. Ashlock paused. He had heard of this Azure clan before. Looking in his inventory, he soon found the hefty leather-bound book engraved with the golden text spatial techniques of the Azure clan. Interesting. The clan Diana is supposedly from is called the Ravina clan, and now I am learning about a technique from the Azure clan. Flash step, Stella tapped her chin in deep thought. Sounds interesting, but how can I move myself instantly without first making a portal? Do I mess around with how I set the spatial anchor? No idea, Ashlock admitted. Sadly, that was all the book had to say. It was more like reading a history report than an actual book with anything valuable. Spatial step sounded interesting, but Ashlock didn't see a need to teleport himself right now, so leaving Stella to ponder, he flipped through the pages to the one that interested him the most from the name Spatial Lock. The reason was simple. Ashlock had just discovered the significant weakness of his new dimensional overlap skill was that people could simply walk away, and by the technique name alone, he concluded this would be useful to learn and sounded simpler than time dilation or anchor seal. Let's see. Ashlock mumbled as he began reading the single paragraph of text on the page to himself. Spatial lock is the bane of all spatial cultivators and a greatly feared technique sometimes imbued into accursed artifacts. It allows spatial affinity cultivators with a higher cultivation stage to lock onto a target's spatial chi, preventing them from teleporting or moving using spatial techniques such as portals or spatial step within their range. Ashlock thought back to how Hammond had wrestled away the control of his own spatial chi due to his higher cultivation stage. I should already be able to imitate that against a weaker spatial cultivator, but this is different. Spatial lock didn't involve wresting away control. It outright blocks the person from being able to escape in the first place. This is perfect. Ashlock decided. There was just one problem. The book didn't actually tell him how to perform a spatial lock, so he would need to figure it out himself. Luckily, he had figured out a few spatial techniques by himself in the past. All he needed was an open mind and heaven to understand his crazy ideas. Chapter 195. Ruthless Training. This is why system skills are so much better than techniques. I just think about using them, and bam, there we go. But techniques. I actually have to consider and practice to use them. How bothersome. Ashlock flexed his star core to exert his presence on the pocket realm and tried once again to spatial lock Stella in place to prevent her movement, but she effortlessly summoned multiple portals at the click of a finger and got away. 10 minutes had passed since the start of their practice duel, and Ashlock felt no closer to figuring out the teachings of the Azure clan contained in that book Stella had shown him. It doesn't help that all they provided was the technique's title, spatial lock, and a short description of its end result. Ashlock grumbled. Making portals hadn't been too hard as I had my knowledge from Earth regarding bending space to better convey my intentions to heaven. As without heaven understanding my will, the technique will not manifest. No wonder everyone wasn't running around with 100 techniques in their arsenal. They were such bother to find and then learn even with his perfect connection. With heaven due to his large star core, translation skill, and fragment of divinity, which basically made him one of heaven's chosen. Meanwhile, Stella hadn't been able to understand a word of the Azure Clan Concepts book as it was all written in confusing, nonsensical language, as that's what the Heaven's Whispers were to the cultivators of this world. A load of indecipherable nonsense that only became clear by piecing the fragments together after years of meditating. The problem with this spatial lock technique isn't that I can't tell heaven what I want, but rather I have no idea how to make it happen. I've tried to exert my influence and assume control of all the spatial chi in this pocket realm, but I've had mixed results as the spatial chi in this pocket realm isn't mine. It belongs to the pocket realm, therefore, assuming total control isn't easy as Stella has tight control of the spatial chi a meter or two around her. A loud clang reverberated through the pocket realm dyed in a purple hue as Stella emerged headfirst from a portal and ruthlessly hit one of the swords wielded by his thorn-covered vine with enough force to make the vine yield to her might, and the sword fly out of the vine's grasp and clatter to the stone below. Ooh. This pocket realm is great. Stella cheered as a portal snapped into existence below her head before Ashlock could retaliate. She re-emerged near the now swordless vine and severed the vine in two with a clean downward cut. Ashlock withdrew his focus from the vine to numb the pain, and despite the damage she had caused, Stella seemed unsatisfied as she paused beside the vine, lost in thought. Something the matter? Ashlock asked through abyssal whispers, not getting an answer. He asked, "How are you finding fighting in the pocket realm?" This pocket realm is great, as the abundant spatial chi lets me easily make portals. Which lets me focus more on where I am actually going and fighting back. She then lowered her sword and sighed, but even with the pocket realm giving me such an environmental advantage, I can't seem to figure out how I could achieve spatial step, or a sword swing that can cut through reality. It will come in time, Ashlock reassured her. Focus on one of those goals first. How about the spatial step technique? What have you tried so far? Not too much, as I can't converse with heaven to form a new technique while mid-fight, but I did have the idea of trying to make a series of portals so it looked like with a single step. I went from one point to another, but that's just an illusion at the end of the day. A really fast line of portals, not a true one-step teleport. I think that's the right direction, but you must change your perspective. Ashlock replied, portals let one part of you stay still while another pierces through space and appears elsewhere. Think about it, when Knox used shadow step, did she leave anything behind? Was she able to shadow step her sword forward but stay standing still? No. Stella tapped her chin. Their entire body would emerge all at once as if they had always been there. Exactly. Maybe think of folding or compressing space instead of piecing it or setting anchors. That way, by taking a single step, you effectively move a long distance at once. Ashlock was just saying what made sense to him. In truth, he also had no idea how movement techniques like that worked, but that wasn't his problem. He had little use for movement techniques, being a tree and all. His goal instead was to find ways to stop them. He didn't like foes being about to escape his areas of control, either around his main body or that of his offspring. Stella, I have a question. Sure, what's up? Stella was broken from the thought and looked up at his canopy shrouded in the purple hue of the slowly decaying pocket realm. Spatial lock, from the description, allows spatial cultivators with a higher cultivation stage to lock onto a target's spatial chi, preventing them from teleporting or moving using spatial techniques such as portals or spatial step within their range. Yet I have run into a slight issue. You have a bubble of spatial chi firmly in your control around your body. I may be able to stop portals from forming a distance away from you, but as long as you create them nearby, I cannot prevent their creation. How do you think I can get around this? Stella tilted her head. I'm not sure. But if my chi is what's inconveniencing you, that's what you should focus on controlling. Stella laughed. Maybe try and convince heaven that my chi is yours. Never mind, that's too crazy. No, hold on. You might be onto something, Ashlock replied. It did sound ridiculous, but she was right. Either he needed to somehow isolate Stella and her chi from heaven so she couldn't use techniques or somehow gain control of her own chi. Spatial lock is a far more sinister technique than I anticipated. Ashlock mused. I might need to learn a few stepping stone techniques first, like finer chi control or how to isolate people. A moment passed, and Ashlock decided he would ponder on this later. Checking his sign-in system, he noted that less than 100 credits remained, so it was about time to wrap this training session up and dismiss this pocket realm, but there was one thing left he wanted to test. Stella, I can't hold this pocket realm open much longer, and the chi density has decreased significantly to the point it's not that much better than the area around the spatial affinity trees outside, so further cultivation or fighting in here is a waste of my energy, Ashlock explained, but I do want to test how well this pocket realm works as a defensive shield. Could you go outside and try and blast it with spatial chi attacks? Stella grinned, would be my pleasure. With that, she turned and left, exiting the spatial realm as easily as she came. Ashlock's vision blurred, and he joined her outside by looking through a root. The purple hue of the pocket realm had lightened considerably, and he could now see the shadow of his giant trunk lurking within. There were also 2 other people here. Elaine was bent over her knees, gasping for breath as if she had just run a marathon in the desert heat. Meanwhile, Diana calmly stood beside her, retracting her raven wings into her back. Oh hey Diana, Stella said, waving to the demoness as she emerged from the pocket realm. Why's Elaine here? Diana grinned, showing her fangs. Douglas was throwing a fit over being asked to fix the destroyed palace without the assistance of Jeb and demanding someone went to help him hire earth cultivators to assist him, so me and Elaine snuck away and left the Grand Elder, or Elder Margaret, to deal with it. Stella snorted, Douglas will get over it. The palace needed a redo anyway. So what are you up to? Diana asked, anything fun? Oh yeah. Ash wanted me to test if the pocket realm could be used as a defensive shield, so I am going to blast it. Stella smirked. Want to have a go after me? Assuming there's anything left. You don't have to ask twice. Diana rolled her shoulders as she walked over and cracked her neck. I've got some demonic chi that I need to splurge. Perfect. Stella twirled back to face the pocket realm and gathered spatial chi into a ball over her hand that swirled and compressed in and out as if trying to eat itself. Her blonde hair fluttered around as sparks of spatial chi lashed out at the surroundings, tearing cracks in reality and making the air shudder as the ball gathered. More chi from Stella's star core. Is she trying to make a miniature black hole? Ashlock wondered as he witnessed Stella waste a bit more chi than she probably should on such an experiment. A sword slash or 2 imbued with spatial chi would have sufficed. Whatever, it's fine. The mystic realm opens up soon, so any chi spent now won't matter too much as her cultivation will soar by leaps and bounds by spending a month in a pocket realm far better than this one. Take this. Stella shouted as she drew her hand back and hurled the ball of spatial chi across the mountain peak cricket ball style. The swirling condensed mass of spatial chi tore through the air and smashed into the outer layer of the pocket realm. Ashlock switched his view to inside the pocket realm and watched as the ball splattered on the bubble. A wave of purple spread out through the pocket realm from the impact point but soon fizzled out and dispersed. Hardly any damage. Ashlock noted and relayed to Stella, it seems this pocket realm can be used as a shield against spatial chi. Stella seemed miffed about the performance of her overpowered attack. Ashlock wondered if she was about to try and attack again, but to his surprise, she turned and shouted at the pile of healing ints. Zeus. Smite me down where I stand so I may harness your heavenly spark and defeat this stupid thing. He is healing, Stella, Ashlock chuckled, and don't go asking him to smite you. You aren't totally lightning resistant, and there's no telling how much your body can absorb before you explode. Yeah, Stella grumbled as she looked at Diana, I guess it's your turn. Don't get too jealous when I destroy it, Diana laughed as she dashed forward. Raven wings thrice her size sprouted from her back, giving her a boost in speed as claws of demonic chi manifested around her hands, and she charged straight into the pocket realm. The moment her claws made contact with the spatial bubble, there was an intense ripple across the pocket realm's surface. With Diana as the epicenter, black corruption spread throughout the pocket realm like wildfire, causing the whole thing to collapse and eventually pop like a balloon out of existence. Dimensional overlap destroyed. A notification sprung into view and vanished as Ashlock felt the world return to normal. The purple hue was gone, and he could now see everyone clearly. Okay, demonic chi is very effective against my dimensional overlap, so it won't be advantageous against the beast tide unless I summon a pocket realm from hell. Ashlock wondered but became concerned as Diana collapsed to her knees. Diana shuddered as her long black hair that reached her waist regressed like snakes up her back and reverted to her usual tomboyish hair that obscured her eyes, which shifted from pure black to dull gray. The majestic raven wings sprouting from her shoulder blades and the demonic chi that had been shrouding her hands in the shape of claws vanished. Finally, her black jeans and white t-shirt became baggy, her body became less voluptuous, and she shrunk an inch or two in height. She was back to normal. Exhaling a shaky breath, Diana slowly got to her feet and flexed her hands. Phew. This feels so much better, she muttered as Stella came running over to her. What happened to you? Stella asked while putting a supporting hand on Diana's shoulder. The previous miffed look on Stella's face had shifted to one of genuine concern for her friend. Nothing much. My body's careful balance between demonic and water chi has been out of whack since the fight with Lucius, Diana offered Stella a weak smile. If I have too much water chi in my soul, I lose much of my strength and emotions. But too much demonic chi and I become overwhelmed with vigor and lose rationality. It's quite vexing, really. I would prefer a more seemingly chilled bloodline like yours. Stella laughed. Is that so? I was the one who was jealous of your bloodline. Mine is lame in comparison to turning into a demon. You think it's cool? Diana blinked, but I become an irrational monster. We've gone over this before, Diana. Stella shook her head and withdrew her hand. Nobody around here cares if you are half demon or whatever. Actually, I kind of prefer your demon side. You are more fun. More fun? How? Diana said flatly. Oh, that reminds me. Elder Margaret told me you gave Sebastian his cut from the spatial rings. Diana presented her empty palm. You can't be trusted with them. Give them to me. I will use the Silver Spire name to hire an appraiser so we can evaluate the artifacts well, sell the ones we don't need, and keep the rest. Stella pouted as she handed the many silver rings to Diana. See. This is what I was saying. You're all business and no fun as a human. At least keep the fangs. They were cute. Diana stowed away the rings and shrugged. Fine, but right now, I would rather have my emotions suppressed as much as possible after this morning. Is that because you met Maple's family? Stella leaned in a little closer. Were they also fluffy squirrels? What were they like? Oh wait, didn't they say something about your bloodline? Ow. Stella, did you forget Maple has been asleep on your head this whole time? Ashlock laughed as the squirrel hissed and rolled back onto its stomach. Also, don't mention bloodlines unless you want the heavens to strike you down. They can darn well try, Stella cursed as she rubbed her forehead, and that hurt. One of Maple's siblings that the patriarch named Neptune said they wanted to meet me in the mystic realm to show me something. Diana sighed. I don't think I will be able to meditate or sleep for at least a few days after meeting them once, let alone twice. It will be finey, Stella patted Diana on the shoulder. Just rest up for today, and you will feel better tomorrow. Okay, but what are you going to be doing? Diana asked as Stella began marching across the mountain peak toward Elaine, who had just about recovered her breathing. Training our favorite void girl, Stella grinned as she threw a sword. It skidded across the stone and came to a pause at Elaine's feet. You're coming in the mystic realm this time round, whether you like it or not, and Douglas is already grumpy enough without you dying to some void beast, so let's get you trained up. We have 10 days. Elaine hesitantly picked up the sword, gave Stella's enthusiastic expression one look, and then called out to Diana. Ah. She's the real demon. Diana, help. Can't you train me instead? I need to rest my head for a day or so. Diana sluggishly collapsed on the bench and massaged her temples. Just bear with Stella for a day or two. Elaine yelped. I'm gonna die. The courtyard soon became filled with the clashes of swords and Elaine begging Stella to relax for just a moment as she hadn't recovered from running across the entire mountain range after Diana. A hungry void beast won't care if you're tired, Stella shouted gleefully as she increased the pace. Ashlock decided to leave them to it and cycled his meditation technique. Occasionally, he would leave the dark recess of his mind to check on things before promptly returning to his consciousness to converse deeply with heaven and further his understanding of spatial techniques. Hours turned to days, and before Ashlock knew it, a week had passed with the arrival of good news. Elder Brent had returned from his hunting trip with snacks.